Now, we were talking about Morgan and that the
Yeah.
CIA didn't really trust Morgan.
Yeah.
Can you go a few steps before, just in the event that we didn't get
Yeah, well, I'm
in?
talking about William Alexander Morgan, who I think I pointed out, it may have been this, but anyway, I pointed out that his career, I followed mine very closely. He was in the Army, didn't get along. He ended up in Chillicothe, but he didn't get along with Chillicothe either, so they transferred him to Milan, Michigan, which is out-and-out prison, so it was harder to do time. But when we went down, he came down to, after I went to, I kept in track with him, kept in touch with him rather, and so he came down to IRC there in Coral Gables and came to the office and told me that he was going to go to Cuba and help Castro. Castro, of course, hadn't taken over at that time. So after Castro did take over, he became a confidant of him, and he was very close. He was a confidant of Castro's, and it turned out one of Castro's most effective agent provocateurs. Now,
Provocateurs?
yeah, an agent provocateur is someone that tries to get someone into something, like a snitch. It's a word, but you don't, at that level.
Well, that's a nice way to call it.
Well, at that level, you don't say they're a snitch.
Yeah.
I mean, down in the gutter, when you talk about the mafia and organized crime, of course, you say he's a snitch, he's a rat, he's a fink. But up there, when we're talking about in the governments, he is an agent provocateur. So he got the idea.
You can even put that down on your resume, and it doesn't sound that bad, huh?
No, it doesn't sound bad at all. So anyway, he came to Florida, and he approached us, and he and another fellow by the name of Tallahatchie. He and Alexander Tallahatchie, they came and they said they were putting together, that he had broken with Castro, and they wanted to put together a second front. At that time, Castro's grip on Cuba really wasn't that firm. I mean, they had thousands and thousands of opponents in the same area of Cuba where he first fomented his revolution. They were there trying to stir up trouble. So, and they had many thousands of Cubans in Miami at that time that were anxious to get back. Some of them were from the Batista regime, some of them were from the Socorros regime. They even have ones that were as far back as the Grand Martin regime, and they were all anxious to get back to Cuba, invade Cuba. They didn't think it would take a lot of work, so he came over and he started raising money. And the first he raised a lot of money from Trujillo, who, of course, Trujillo and Somoza both hated Castro and wanted him out of the way. So we flew over to Ciudad Trujillo in Dominican Republic. I went over with a guy named Frank Nelson and with Alexander Morgan. We went over to meet, and we went with Johnny Abbas, who was Chief of Security for Trujillo, Pedroza, who had been he was Chief of Staff of the Cuban Army before he fell out with Castro. So, but Frank Nelson was he was a CIA agent. So I flew him over there, and so Trujillo promised Morgan considerable sums. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks later, he came into Cuba and gave him $500,000 in cash. And gave him a little bit later, he gave him another $500,000 with $100,000 extra for expenses.
Oh, that's not a small change.
So, but, and we were you know, we were actually extorting money from all these other rich Cubans who were there, you know. Jose Alamán, for instance, who had been the Minister of Education and had left Cuba with the suitcases full of money. I might have mentioned that before too. And he was there, and Batista himself, and all these rich Cubans who had fled Cuba with this bags full of money. So we were extorting money from those guys.
Were those some of the people that you were mentioning when you were in Florida, and they were kind of pulling up with their Rolls Royces, picking up all their little welfare checks?
They'd come down to pick up their checks, you know.
Yeah.
And we went over to see Orlando Piedra, who was the had been chief of police of Havana. He was Batista's paymaster, and we told him that we didn't get a sizable contribution from you know, those guys that from Batista. We were going to drag him out of his luxury.
Havana, huh?
Yeah, and drop him in the ocean.
Ricky Ricardo's from Havana.
Yeah, that's right. You know, Ricky, so was Cesar Romero.
Yeah.
Cesar Romero's grandfather was I forget what his name was now, but he was one of the heroes of Cuba many years before.
Huh.
But you know, we were so. But in the meantime, Alexander Morgan was trying to get together a group and go down and fly in and invade Cuba. So he did get one little plane load that went down, and when the pilots came back, they were saying, "Oh yeah, there's all kinds of signs of Viva Americano down with Castro," and they could hear gunfire and everything, and the city of Trinidad was in the rebels' hands, and they came back. But still, the CIA, the professionals, and all the contract agents who knew the Cubans well did not fully trust Alexander Morgan. But finally they had a group together, and they had a group who were going to fly down and secure fly down and land on this beachhead, and then Pedroza with his airborne troops was going to go in afterwards and land. So all the contract agents, most of those are being flown for contract agents for the CIA, and they all found some reason for not going. They either got disappeared, they got sick, they had engine failure, they had all sorts of things because
lots of coincidences. Huh?
they were just scared to go. So when they went down, of course, and when they did go down with a handful of guys, they went down and landed, and of course there was Castro himself waiting to greet them, and he rounded them up. They rolled up all those second front people, and about 6,000. They arrested about 6,000 people at that time, and of course that's the last serious threat to Castro, and including the Bay of Pigs, which came afterwards, but the Bay of Pigs. Actually, Trujillo, you know, Trujillo, you know, Dominican Republic is on the other end of the island from Cuba, you know. So, or just no, it isn't. It's just across the straits. It's Haiti. It's on the other end of the island, but they're just across a very narrow strait. In 1959, actually, Castro decided he was going to invade the Dominican Republic, and so he had a yacht, the Grandma, which had been one of his earlier yachts. He'd converted it into a gunship, and a couple of frigates and everything.
Why do you want to invade it?
I just want to take it over. He wanted to take it. Of course, he knew Trujillo was trying to kill him, and he kept trying. He figured he's going to he'd try until he got the job done, you know.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, they rounded up a bunch of Trujillo rounded up a bunch of campesinos that are, natives and this and that and the other, and handed them some guns and everything, and told them that they were to, defend the beaches and so forth. And they asked if there was anybody didn't want to fight, and two guys stepped forward. So the company commander, he just pulled out his .45, shot them both, killed them. The rest of them volunteered.
Huh? Why?
But funny thing happened when Castro attacked. They got near the beach, and the frigates for some reason turned tail and ran, and they left those airborne or these ranger type personnel on the beach all by themselves. And then of course Trujillo captured them and killed them all right down to the last minute. I think he saved one or two to put them on display. But I mean, Trujillo was one. He was one.
It was not nice.
I mean, he was one bloodthirsty guy. I mean, Castro compared to him was nothing. So, but he was always trying to kill Castro, and of course it was a big blow to him that he lost those airplanes that flew down there, which flew down and landed in Cuba, and got taken over. That was a big blow to him. But he kept right on trying, and he had up in late '60, '61, even before the Bay of Pigs, he was still putting these plans into operation. He had one of the most effective assassins in the world, Johnny Abbas, working for him, and Abbas was an interesting guy. He had a Spanish mother, and he had a Spanish father and a Swiss mother, that's the way it was. And he had been in the gambling business with Trujillo's brother, Nino, and then he got to be chief of security. He had been in Mexico before that. As a matter of fact, it's ironic that the guy that we freed from the Guatemala jail, Carlos Castillo Armas, he 3 years later, after that coup, he was assassinated, and it was Abbas, the guy in Trujillo. He was in Mexico at that time, pulled off that assassination. But so all during right up through the Bay of Pigs, we were involved in our main objective at that time. Of course, CIA had agents all over the world doing all sorts of things. And they had these misadventures going on every place else. But there in Florida, that's about the only thing that we were concerned with at that time was Cuba. My role in the Bay of Pigs was just really nothing more than logistical and arranging supplies and that sort of thing.
Like what kind of supplies?
Well, arms, ammunition, getting ships that they would use in the invasion, training troops going down to Guatemala and that sort of thing, and getting and working with the construction company that had carved out a landing strip down in what they called Happy Valley, Guatemala. Can't even pronounce the word. Well, no need trying to big long Spanish name. But one thing that I did do though was to go up with another guy. We went up to Alabama and hired the pilots from the Alabama National Guard that actually did the flying during the Bay of Pigs. I took the money, paid them off, and gave them instructions, gave them all the false identifications that they needed, these various things. So actually, I didn't have an awful lot to do with the Bay of Pigs, although I knew those guys real well. They were the same guys that were over in Guatemala: Howard Hunt, David Atlee Phillips, Rip Robertson, Grayston Lynch, and those guys were all Emil Droller, all those guys. They were now running the Bay of Pigs, but the Bay of Pigs started out as being a small Dieppe type raid to it developed into a full-blown over-the-beach assault, and information was bad. They were counting on an uprising of the Cuban people.
Why did they call it the Bay of Pigs?
Because that was the place that they landed. It landed in a Bahia de Cochinos, was a little bay, and which means Bay of Pigs, and,
oh, okay.
and that's why they called it the Bay of Pigs. Originally, they were not with the plan. Originally, they were not designed. It wasn't designed to land there. It was designed to land at another landing site, which was much more favorable. So they finally ended up landing in an area that they weren't even familiar with, and there was so much coral which they didn't even know about. There was so much coral that it was ripping the bottom out of the boats and everything else. And of course, the whole thing was predicated on them destroying Castro's little Air Force on the ground. And when that didn't happen, and Kennedy called off a strike, a second strike, which would have happened would have been American planes. I mean, that sealed their fate. There's really no point to rehashing, the Bay of Pigs. I mean, it's been gone over so many times, explored so many times that there's. But the only thing you can say for the Bay of Pigs was that Kennedy made an awful lot of enemies. He inherited it, the Bay of Pigs project from Richard Nixon, from Eisenhower Nixon administration, and he was never really enthusiastic about the whole thing. But once committed, and once you say, "Hey, I'm going to do an operation," then you should do it. You shouldn't chicken out at the last moment, which he did, and of course. And with the capturing the 1,100 men were captured and imprisoned. Cost $60 million to ransom them. That made hundreds of thousands of enemies of Kennedy. So that happened in.
Okay, well, we had a little interruption there, didn't we? Anyway, okay, so after all this, and after you, basically nothing was really successful down there. I mean, the Bay of Pigs wasn't successful. They really haven't had anything.
Well, Trujillo was successful. They killed
Trujillo,
but
other than that,
we weren't having much luck. We weren't having any luck with Castro at all.
And during this time, basically your residence was still though California, right? You've already moved to California.
Yeah, I came to California in between the Bay of Pigs, which was April 19th in '61, and the assassination of Trujillo, which was May 31st in 1961. During that period of time, I moved to California permanently, and I think we've already discussed the group of people that I met when I came out here, whose names are given to me, who served actually. There's three different groups. One group was contract agents for the CIA. One group was just a slippery group of politicians who were friends with acquaintances of Meyer Lansky and Doc Stasher. And the other group, of course, was the mafia guys who were associated with, in a lesser way, of course, but associated with Licavoli. And
now, Sam Giancana, bad guy, right?
oh yeah.
And John Roselli, Bad guy.
Yeah, they're both Chicago gangsters.
And William King Harvey.
He was a legend in the CIA, a long-time legend of the CIA. Then he was kicked out of the FBI because he couldn't get along with Hoover. Then he came over to the CIA, and he lasted a long, long time until he just drank himself right out of a job.
And how about Peter Licavoli?
Peter Licavoli, of course,
That guy.
he was one of the most prominent organized crime figures in America.
And Ray Ryan.
Ray Ryan was one of the biggest gamblers in the world and was also an important asset of the CIA, and he owned lots and lots of properties, and most important to the CIA was his Bermuda Dunes Airport, where he fronted for the CIA. The CIA paid for all the improvements of the airport. He and a guy by the name of Ernie Dunleavy ran it.
Frank Hayden.
Frank Hayden was Ray Ryan's general manager on the West Coast.
And Philip Twombly.
Philip Twombly. Philip Twombly was arguably the most important asset on the West Coast. How high up he ranked in the CIA hierarchy, I really don't know, but it was very high, because all of the monies, not all, but just about all of the money that came from contingency funds to contract agents on the West Coast came from Philip Twombly. Most all of the instructions that we received came through Philip Twombly or through Richard Wilson. Richard Wilson was a CIA agent that had been at JM Wave in Miami, and he moved to California. He was sort of semi-retired, you know, but you never retire. He was a screenwriter and so forth. So a lot of the instructions came from George Reynolds. From George Reynolds came to Phil Twombly. From Phil Twombly came to us.
And Philip Twombly was associated with Coca-Cola, right?
Yes.
I keep having that song going through my head, like to give the world a Coke.
He had been.
And that's all American, Dad.
Yeah, well,
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, he represented old money, you know, and the Ivy League school group. Well, they were patriotic.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
that's what they felt.
Yeah.
I mean, they felt that the American way of life was being threatened. They liked the American way of life, so it isn't easy to why they wouldn't decide that they would do the CIA's bidding. You know, at that time, you know, the CIA wasn't exactly a dirty word like it finally became.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was executive vice president for foreign operations, for Caribbean operations of Coca-Cola, and it's interesting that Kendall, a man by the name of Kendall, was also. He was with Pepsi-Cola, which was a great rivalry, and he was also a very, very important CIA property.
What was his name again?
Kendall.
Kendall.
He was married to Joan Crawford.
Oh, I saw that in Mommy Dearest.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And she ended up the head of Pepsi-Cola.
Yes, she did.
So.
I only know that because of that movie. But.
Yeah. Well, anyway. So, and Kendall used to brag that Pepsi-Cola was the eyes and ears of the CIA in the Caribbean, and those guys, that's what they did. So when they left, and of course Kendall didn't leave Pepsi-Cola, but when
he died.
Yeah, he died.
Yeah.
So when Philip Twombly, you know, when he came west to California. And so forth, it was just natural. The CIA says, okay, you know, can you do these things for us? And he worked it into this program. And he was an extremely important guy. I mean, he immediately acquired the controlling interest in a bank in Fullerton, which was used to funnel money through for the CIA. It was also used by Licavoli too, because he got acquainted with Licavoli somewhere back there, and Licavoli used that bank too at times. And he was a head of, he was president of Blue Goose Growers, and which was the second largest agriculture combine in the country, with properties all the way from Hawaii to Florida. He was a partner in a huge thing called TED Leasing, which leased equipment that the and acquired equipment that the CIA wanted. He was in hundreds of partnerships, so he was, you know, he was into everything. But he still was an important, he was an important CIA property. And another one of the, and of course, he knew George Reynolds very well. Now, George Reynolds,
he was another CIA.
he was another CIA property. He fronted 4 big companies in and around Morgan City, Louisiana, and the biggest of which was called the Atchafalaya Labor Cruise, and they had a huge staging area down in the bayous, and he was another one that was deeply involved in CIA operations. To what extent, you never know. These guys do not tell you. They don't tell you who they answer to. I had a letter from Phil Twombly when he was saying that George Reynolds got a request from his superiors. He didn't say who, wanting information about how much money that the CIA, how much in contingency funds had been put into the operations that we were in. Not all the operations, how much that we had been put into to the documentation mills that we had operated. But and as a matter of fact, Phil Twombly had his superiors had a question mark beside it in back of it, because he didn't know who he was talking about either. So you don't really know who these guys are they're reporting to. They don't tell you. You don't ask.
Well, do you want to know? You don't even really want to know, do you?
No, you don't want to know. But curiosity kills more than the cat. You just don't want to know. You don't want that connection. You couldn't tell. You couldn't inform on these people if you wanted to, because you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And there's not a hell of a lot in the way of documents floating around. Most everything was face-to-face meetings and so forth. And even in the correspondence, it's usually couched in a way that it doesn't mean anything. If you'd read it, it would be rather innocent.
Yeah.
So that was the George Reynolds, of course, and then Reynolds.
Wasn't he related with someone that?
Yeah, George Reynolds, of course, his brother Bob Reynolds had been chief of station at J.M. Wave. He was a card-carrying CIA agent.
What was J.M. Wave?
J.M. Wave was I keep referring to that without mentioning what J.M. Wave was the huge CIA station in Miami. It was the largest station in the world outside of Langley itself. And although there wasn't a Langley even before Langley, it was a huge station, and especially during the Cuban crisis and during the Bay of Pigs and so forth. I mean, it was a big place. But Bob Reynolds was chief of station. Now, to be a chief of station in the CIA, you're up pretty high, you know what I mean? So he was a really important member. And of course, these guys are always looking for someone or some organization or something that they can press into service. You're looking for them all the time. Same way the mafia is always looking for people around that they can use to make money. CIA used it a little different, but they were always looking. And of course, he was related. George Reynolds' wife was Ruth Reynolds, was married to Frank Belcher.
And Frank Belcher.
Frank Belcher was one of the most powerful lawyers in California, and he was related to J.A. Belcher of Belcher Oil, who was a very important CIA property. So probably it was J.A. Belcher that probably got Frank Belcher to agree to become a CIA property, in the extent that, you know, Frank Welch didn't do any dirty work or anything like that, but it was mainly in the way of using using his name and so forth for the funneling of money and that sort of thing. And of course, he used his influence wherever he could, and he did later when I was arrested and so forth. That's getting ahead of the game. But all those, you know, were sort of interwoven. Now these guys, and in the meantime, these guys, the group in California that I've referred to as KG and Co., which was Knight, Littleson, and that group, they didn't know, you know, Philip Twombly. I mean, I threw the name in Philip Twombly with it as being the important people that I knew, but Phil Twombly didn't know these people to any great extent. I mean, he did business with some of them, but as far as being intimately involved with that group, he really wasn't. So, and then of course, at the same time that this was going on, I was still doing work for Peter Licavoli, because you know, even, you know, I wasn't making much money, but you had to find additional means of income, and that was part of the advantages of being a contract agent, is that everybody looked the other way, and you were just given license to build up your little criminal empire, little criminal fiefdom here and there, you know, and without being afraid that you were going to get arrested. But a lot of it was legal, but a lot of it was illegal.
But the point being is that they just turned their head.
They just turned their head, you know. So Licavoli was always a busy guy. He was always into things, and of course, all people were always coming to him. So in this was true in 61, 62 in there. Some of the things we did at that time is he acquired a couple of companies. One was Military Armaments and Advisor Company. It had offices in Tucson, Detroit, and London. It was used for acquiring arms, ammunition, that sort of thing, which they would export. He would export with the blessing of with the government, to avoid so that the government could have complete deniability. They didn't do it, you know what I mean. We were always taking guns down to Nicaragua and that sort of thing. And also at the same time, he formed Southwest Aircraft Corporation, or acquired it. And this was for the purpose of acquiring airplanes. And this is what would happen, is that they're always acquiring airplanes that a lot of times that the government needed for their clandestine operations here and there. They were always needing special aircraft, and he would acquire these aircraft. Now it's interesting that I think I may have mentioned before about this company buying the 4,000. I mean the 50 B-52s, didn't it?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we.
That was pretty interesting.
Yeah, we discussed the fact that he managed to somehow buy these B-52s, paid $400,000 for.
Yeah, we tapped on a lot up until, I mean.
A lot of this stuff I think we already covered before we took our.
Yeah, I think we've gone into all the different people.
Took our little break. I think,
1961.
I think we've, you know, I think we were actually sort of getting close up to 1963, weren't we?
I think we were.
Yeah.
And so basically all this stuff up until this point was just hobby.
Pardon me?
All up until this was basically about hobby, because 63 was a pretty big year for you, right?
Well, this was just, those were.
You're just testing the waters right now,
we
it seems like.
We were just getting into things.
Because we have a lot of stuff.
Not the things that we play. Yeah, 63 started out, I mean in 63. The first indication that something was happening in 1963 was that we, you know, the money that was coming to us, to operate these proprietary interests that we had. I mean, we were functioning almost entirely on legal proceeds. We weren't getting any money from Uncle Sam. I mean, we were running a documentation plant. We had a weapons modification plant up at Goleta, principally making silencers, modifying all kinds of weapons. And we had a fixed base operation, too. We had one at Van Nuys Airport, and down at Bermuda Dunes Airport. So the funds coming through to us, was a trickle. I mean, you'd ask Twombly for something, and he would say, "Hey, we don't have the money." You ask George Reynolds, "I don't have the money." But suddenly, in the first part of '63, suddenly the pipeline became unplugged.
They had money.
They had money. We asked, when we started asking for money. I mean, we got it. In 1 month, we bought. I don't have any planes we bought, new planes. We bought and one of which cost over $1 million.
They didn't have any money, and now they have that, huh?
Yeah, suddenly they were really getting funded. We'd been trying to get a lathe a tape operated lathe to turn out all these silencers. You turn them out automatically. They wouldn't by tape, so you didn't have to even have an operator there, and never made a mistake. It just turned them out, and it hadn't been. We couldn't. They said this money it cost about $50,000, and they said, "No way, we don't have the money." Suddenly it became unplugged. So that was a sort of an indication that, hey, something is happening here. So, but we had a little problem early in March that was sort of even before we learned about any kind of operations. We had a little problem. In March, we received Frank Hayden wrote a letter to Peter Licaboli, in which he was complaining that they had a problem with Ray Ryan because Marshall Cafano, who was a really notorious Chicago gangster, Nick the Greek, who was a very, very famous gambler, Charlie Tureen, who was, or Charlie Tureen's son, I forget what his name was, Charlie the Blade they called Charlie Tureen.
Wow, nice
Blade.
names.
Yeah, the Blade. Yeah, that was his weapon of choice, was the blade. So they called him Charlie the Blade. He's a bad guy too. So anyway, and Alan Smiley. Alan Smiley's name was Aaron Smehoff. He changed it to Alan Smiley. He was sort of one of those gangster hangers-on, that always on the fringe, and knew all these guys. As a matter of fact, it was Alan who was sitting on the other end of the couch the night Bugsy Siegel got knocked off.
Yeah.
So anyway, that they had tried to shake Ray Ryan down for $60,000, claiming that he had cheated Nick the Greek in a card game. So Frank Hayden was upset about it because he thought it was going to, lead to something else. So he wrote Peter Licaboli a letter asking him if he could intercede, so Licaboli then sent me a handwritten note saying that we had a problem and he wanted me to take care of it. That whatever I had to do, I had to talk to Sam Giancana, who Cafano answered to. If I had to talk to Sam Giancana, or even Tony Accardo, who was above Sam Giancana, or anybody else, or take what measures we had so as to protect Ray Ryan. So that happened about the end of about the end of April. And just about that same time, I received a letter from, excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. We received, I received a letter from Philip Twombly, which is one of the documents that I have now mounted up, which I hope we get a chance to look at, a photograph if we can.
Well, if we can go, I'd like to go over all of them so you can kind of point them out which one goes with what.
Yeah.
Do you want to go over them now?
Do you want to stop the filming and I can do it?
I think that, because they kind of start in 63, so that's where we should
Yeah, they start.
begin.
They start in 63. You'll see the one there with. Do you want to? Are you going to try to? Are you recording?
I am going to pause this, Dad. Okay, Dad. Why don't we go over a little bit of these things right here? We've got a letter to Mr. Licavoli.
This one is a letter from Frank Hayden, who was Ray Ryan's manager, pointing out the problems that he thinks that this extortion effort on the part of Marshal Capano and those guys is going to have, that they're afraid that's going to lead back to us. You want to move to the second document?
Yeah.
The second document is the note to me from Peter Licavoli, in which he says, hey, we've got a problem and I want you to take care of it. I want you to do whatever you have to do because it was too important to have somebody like Capano mess that up. This document...
And we have one from Twombly Ranches, it looks like.
Twombly Ranches. That's where Twombly is writing to me, telling me that we're going to have a special order coming in from our distributor in Dallas, and that distributor happened to be a man by the name of Guy Bannister, and that our client, he wants me to personally supervise this, and that actually the client wants all the original art destroyed when the job is complete. And that turned out to be the Lee Harvey Oswald stuff that we did for Lee Harvey Oswald in '63, which we will get to later.
Now we have down here. We have, let's see, I have the
Atchafalaya Labor Crews.
Okay.
That is the. Can you read it?
Can I read it?
Yeah.
It says John R. Moon.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says, whoops, Dear Jack, this is to advise you that Leroy and I will be in the New Orleans area from the 6th of August until the 20th.
Yeah. Now he's pointing out that he's going to be there, and they're going to meet a gentleman by the name of Tommy Eli Davis, that they're going to be staying at the LaSalle Hotel. I can connect them there if I want to. And the very end indicates that George Reynolds says that he's going to talk to Lloyd Cobb. Lloyd Cobb was the so-called Potato Man, and he ran. He wasn't the president of the Trade Mart, but he ran the Trade Mart. He was John Lawrence's boss. He was his de facto boss, and he was the boss of Clay Shaw, whose name became notorious many years later. But he was saying that he was going to see, that he was going to. The next one is from Ernie Dunleavy,
Okay.
who is the.
We have a low battery here, so
Yeah.
I'll have to charge this battery. We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got from the Bermuda Dunes.
Yeah, he's telling us that the Frank Belcher's plane has already finished and that they'll be ready for the plane from Dallas to put in the stall equipment as soon as it's received, because we were going to buy a plane then. Can you read that one?
Yeah, it says, Dear Jack, the top overhaul of the Caribou is complete. Work on
this one.
Oh, that one?
Yeah, what about this one?
That one, I have the Potato Man advised our distributor in New Orleans that Warren has submitted a report and has positively identified the man coming out of the trade march.
Okay, before we, I think what you should do is recharge the battery before we get to this document. Will you identified what the document is?
Okay.
But in between this document, there was a lot of correspondence between George Reynolds, Phil Twombly, and myself regarding things that happened in August of 1963.
Well, then we don't want to miss any of that.
Now we want to explain what happened and the efforts we went through to finally get this.
Okay, Dad, we just viewed some correspondence, and we're going to view a little bit more later on, but particularly you have a letter from Twombly and an order. Could you elaborate on this and go a little bit more into detail, and we'll go back to some correspondence, but I want to get some information.
Yeah, that's very important. In April, I received a very short note.
On April 1963, just to let...
Yeah.
It is 1997 now,
oh,
so...
yeah, long time ago. I received a note from Phil Twombly.
And this is the one that we just looked at?
Yes, the one we just looked at, in which Twombly tells me that we are going to be getting a special order. He usually didn't use the word special very often. He said, we're getting this special order in from our distributor in New Orleans. And our distributor happened to be Guy Bannister. His name is not spelled out in there, but that's who he meant. And that I am to supervise this personally. I didn't supervise all the projects, but anyway, he wanted me to supervise this project personally. And he wanted to, that instructions were that all the artwork was to be destroyed as soon as the project was over. That included not only the artwork, but all of it, and by destroyed, I mean shredded. And this would...
But we're not talking about artwork like most average people know artwork.
No, we're not talking. We're talking about negatives and this sort of documentation, and that all the negatives would be shredded. Any throwaways that we had, any junk would be shredded, everything, so that nothing would ever indicate that went through our plant. As it turned out, this happened to be the limited amount of work that we did for Lee Harvey Oswald. We didn't do a great deal of work for Lee Harvey Oswald. And
so technically, you should have been shredding your letters, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, Lee Harvey Oswald he's not mentioned in there.
Yeah.
It's very innocent.
Yeah.
There's no way in the world you could determine from that. And that's the way most correspondence was. Very little. If anything, if something had was especially sensitive, and you'll see a letter in there from Phil Twombly, which he considers that he would send it by special courier. And I mean by special courier, we're not talking about not talking about
Federal Express.
Federal Express. I mean, we're talking about somebody that he knows that would bring it over. And I suppose that truthfully, he probably expected that I would destroy the letter.
Yeah.
And most of the stuff, most of the stuff I did destroy. I either destroyed it or they grabbed it up in search warrants, which I never got back. But the work that we did for Oswald, we did some documentation for him, retired military type documents, Actually, we did it in 3 names: Lee Harvey Oswald, Lee Henry Oswald, Leon Osborne, and Alec Heidel. These documents had already been produced. They sent samples to us. These documents had already been produced by someone else. Probably Lee Harvey Oswald himself, because of the fact that he had worked at a graphics art place where they did have the equipment for doing this. But it was a very, very amateurish effort. And one of the documents they sent us, of course, was a fake Social Security number with Social Security card with a photograph on it. Well, anybody knows that they don't have your photograph on the Social Security card, so we of course didn't even bother about cleaning that up and reproducing that. Now you have to remember, we didn't know Lee Harvey Oswald. We didn't know. I mean, we knew that the pictures were all the same. We didn't know whether this guy was Lee Harvey Oswald or
Leon,
Lee Hen or Leon Osborne or Alex Heidel. We didn't know, but we were just doing this work.
And this is the first time that you'd ever really kind of been introduced to this person at all, in a way.
Yeah, that's the first inkling that we ever had that this person ever existed. We'd heard nothing about him or anything else. And one of the things, though, we produced some cards for him. Well, we also produced some pamphlets. They had turned out.
And who instructs you to do these?
Phil Twombly.
But why was there a focus and a connection with Twombly and Oswald? I mean,
well,
do you know? Do you think?
No, except through Bannister. This came from Guy Bannister. Now, Guy Bannister had been he was a long-time FBI agent, and had been with Naval Intelligence. He started his own detective agency in New Orleans, and was a very, very far right-wing guy, and he was involved with all of these Cubans. Now, somebody in New Orleans or Dallas, probably New Orleans, was running Oswald, was telling Oswald what to do. And then, of course, Guy Bannister he in turn was associated with Reynolds, who in turn was associated with Twombly. And of course, when they wanted these things, they, that's how the connection was made. And Oswald had already ordered some pamphlets, very amateurish type pamphlets, which he'd stamped he stamped 2 addresses on there. One of which was 544 Camp Street, which was the office of Guy Bannister. Guy Bannister, of course, got mad as hell when he saw that although all these things were delivered to him. I mean, he didn't want his name.
No, I'm sure he didn't.
He didn't want his name anyway, because he was known as being very violently anti-communist. So he didn't want to be connected with Oswald in an official way. But Oswald, in my opinion, they were just developing up some legend for him as being pro-Castro. He was pro-Castro, but he didn't have any pro-Castro friends. He was pro-Castro, but all his friends were violently anti-communist. So they had he was trying to act as an agent provocateur, or he was trying to infiltrate these. On one hand, he was trying to infiltrate these right-wing organizations, these Cuban organizations. On the other hand, he was trying to infiltrate these pro-Castro groups. You know, he was writing to everybody and his brother. I mean, he's writing to the Communist Party USA, and
so he has a good trail then, good trail.
He has a good trail. Confusing, but confusing, but he has a lot of paperwork.
Well, that's good though. Confusing would be good in this.
A lot of paperwork.
But this is setting the stage.
Yeah, it's setting the stage for something. And we did as I said, we did a communist card showing that he was a member of the Communist Party. I remember this very specifically because of 2 facts. First of all, later on, when he appeared when he went to Mexico City just before the assassination, and a clerk said that he presented a card indicating he was a member of the Communist Party. The card never turned up, and somebody said, "Hey, you don't. There's no such thing as a card in the Communist Party. When you're a member of the Communist Party, you don't have a card showing that you were a member." But so this poses a problem for us, because if you don't have a card to go by,
and there is none that exists.
I mean, you've got to figure out how are you going to do this?
Yeah.
When we were doing all this documentation, you know, we were making all these false IDs showing that these guys were members of the FBI or the DEA, Secret Service, Naval Intelligence. I mean, we had things to go by, so we knew how to turn them out. The only problem was our products was always better than the original. As a matter of fact, this is what Philip Twombly used to say to us. You know, your stuff is better than the original. Your colors are right on. All your lines are perfect. The government doesn't print things like that. I mean, they're slopping their printer. You print that beautiful stuff, and they're going to say it's a fake. But still, you couldn't get out of the habit of doing the right thing. And we were it's a little bit of a side, but we were always forging all kinds of things. One of the things that was our favorite to do, and we sold a lot of them, you know, was forging turf club cards. So you go to the turf club at the racetrack, and turf club parking, you know, because turf club parking costs a lot of money, and these guys going to these especially these mafiosos going every day to the racetrack, they didn't want to pay for the valet parking, you know, and they'd whip up there with their special parking sticker on, and they got VIP treatment for nothing. But we were always doing all that stuff, you know, forging cars.
I remember going to the racetrack a lot.
Oh, sure.
In the turf club.
Oh, hell, sure. You know, we got first class.
Oh, I loved it. That was fun.
First class all the way, you know, and so we never had any problems there. And we were always trying to forge cards that would open gates. You know, you've seen these ones?
Yeah.
You go and get in gates? That was one of our big things. But I got off the track. But anyway, we did this work for Bannister, Oswald, whichever one you say was the customer. And we mailed this stuff over to Bannister. We did this in about probably May of '63. We didn't hear any more about it until we had to go to in August of '63. We had a shipment of guns that we were taking over to on the outskirts of New Orleans, across Lake Pontchartrain, over to a little training camp over there that was run by the brother of Louis McWillie. And Louis McWillie was, of course, a big organized crime figure. But they had all those Cubans are over there and so forth. It's rumored that one of the guys that was over there at that time was Lee Harvey Oswald, but I really don't know. But at that same time, we received a note or a letter from George Reynolds of the Atchafalaya labor camp, in which he was stated, that's one of the documents that we reviewed, is that he and Leroy, now Leroy was his assistant. Leroy was a helicopter pilot, a regular pilot, a munitions expert, great lock picker, great burglar. I mean, he could do it all. But anyway, they said they were going to go over there and be there. They had some business, and they were going to be there from about the 6th of August until about the 20th. They knew we were going to be there, and they said they were going to be at the LaSalle Hotel was staying there in New Orleans, and they were supposed to meet Thomas Eli Davis, who was another very mysterious character. He was another that fit right in with with the Leroy Young type. He was a deep sea diver, did a lot of work and salvage work and so forth for George Reynolds. He was an instructor, small arms instructor, explosives instructor, and he was going to be there. And it's interesting that many years later, a man by the name of Henry Holt was researching a book, and they were trying to prove that that Thomas Eli Davis was at the LaSalle Hotel during that period of time, and they during that period of time, and he published in his book Reasonable Doubt a torn out page of, he got a hold of the registry of the LaSalle Hotel at that time, and of course he was focusing on Tommy Eli Davis. He didn't even know who George Reynolds or Leroy was, but on that you see Tommy Eli Davis, you actually see one of the rooms is occupied by George Reynolds and Leroy.
Oh, really?
And so it just turned out it was just a funny,
wow,
funny sort of break. And of course,
on the guest registry,
on the guest registry,
right?
And we have a copy of that, you know, which more or less was. I didn't see George Reynolds while I was there, but I met Tommy Eli Davis, and I met and Leroy Young. Of course, I knew Leroy pretty well. You know, we were sort of, you know, the same type of individual, and I met him, and we went down to Guy Bannister's, and he indicated that apparently he had discovered that Lee Harvey Oswald was going to be handing out some leaflets down on Canal Street, which are right down in the middle of all these anti-Castro Cubans on Friday the 9th. And he said, why don't you guys go down? And he says, you've never seen Lee Harvey Oswald. And he said, that's his name, it's really Lee Harvey Oswald. You've never seen Oswald, go over there and take a look at him. You'll see what he looks like. So we went over there, and a guy, a Cuban, one of those fiery Cubans by the name of Carlos Bringuier, who was head of a organization called the CRC. Either it was called the CRC or the DRE at that time, I don't know. It changed. CRC was Cuban Revolutionary Council. It later changed its name to the DRE, which was the Students' Directory. But he was ahead of one of them. But somebody told him that Lee Harvey Oswald, who had visited his place a couple of days before, trying to actually infiltrate his organization, and offered to go to work for his organization, you know, in ousting Castro and that sort of thing. Next thing you know, Carlos hears one of his associates rushes in and says, that guy that came down here, he's over on Canal Street passing out Fair Play for Cuba leaflets. So they rush over there, and Oswald and Bringuier, they get in a little shouting, pushing confrontation. It wasn't anything at all. It wasn't a fist fight or anything. Suddenly the police came up and carted them off. I couldn't understand why they would actually do that. You know, such a minor thing. You know, if you see two guys on the sidewalk pushing each other around, why, you know, usually they just break it up and say, hey, get out of here. Anyway,
maybe they wanted more of a trail or something.
I think so. I don't know what was happening, unless maybe the CIA took a lot. They had a big interest in Oswald at that time, and they might have fomented this. But anyway, it was always the case that it was very mysterious that anything that happened regarding Oswald, somebody was calling up some kind of authority. You know, you had more people interested in him to be just for nothing, because you know he was only at that time he's only a 23-year-old kid. You know,
wow.
So all this unusual interest in him is very, very confusing.
Especially to bring a lot of publicity towards him. Get him
Yeah.
recognized.
Yeah, that was something else
Odd.
again. So they took him down and arrested him, and Guy Bannister said, well, at least you ought to go down and bail him out. And I'm not sure.
Let's get him out of jail so we can do something else to him.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm not sure whether he stayed overnight and was bailed out the next morning. I know we didn't bail him out because actually a guy by the name of Emil Bruneau, who was
what?
Emil Bruneau.
Emil Bruneau.
Yeah, Emil Duke Bruneau, who was a close associate of Carlos Marcello. Carlos Marcello was a mafia king of that whole area of Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, and that sort of thing. He ran everything. But which is now Oswald's uncle, Dutch Moret, his name was Dutch Moret, worked for Carlos Marcello. So they got first Oswald apparently called his cousin, and then she called up Emil, and he went down and bailed him out. So we didn't have to do that. And it was interesting that what happened is here he's arrested for this little shelving confrontation. And what does he do? He calls up the FBI and demands an interview. And strangely enough, they rush right down to talk to him. Now, you would have
just to this little 23-year-old.
Just a little 20-year-old, 23-year-old twerp. You know. So there again, you couldn't understand what was going on. Anyway, he was scheduled to go. He was scheduled to go to night court on Monday night. So we went down to night court, and they gave him a little fine, and he he walked out. There he was on Friday, right back again in front of the Trade Mart, handing out leaflets again. So Guy Bannister says to us, and Bud Belcher happened to be with me at that time. I haven't mentioned he made the trip with me. He flew over together. He did some of the flying and I did some of the flying, and he was just trying to get away from his wife. He liked to make those trips to get away from his wife. So anyway, Guy Bannister says, why don't you guys go over there and you know, give Oswald a little support in what's happening. You know, see what's going on and this and that and the other. We said okay. So we went over there. I went in the Trade Mart to talk to Lloyd Cobb because George Reynolds had been in to see Lloyd Cobb before, and he had told Cobb that, you know, he didn't want any of his associates or his employees or any of those ones of George Reynolds identified in any way. He didn't want to be connected in any way with, you know, with Oswald,
Yeah.
who was running around there and demonstrating at that time. Which is another reason is that gives you an idea that George Reynolds had some idea who Lee Harvey Oswald was, other than.
Well, I'm a little confused as to where nobody wants their addresses on any of this stuff, and nobody wants to be seen with any of this stuff, but then go over and help them, and then go and get them out of jail.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm confused.
Well, I mean, it wasn't anything to get the guy out of jail. I mean, that was no big deal because.
But I don't see why the interest with this young kid.
Well, in the case of Guy Bannister, it was very. I mean, Lee Harvey Oswald was his boy. Lee Harvey Oswald had some connection with him. Lee Harvey Oswald was seen in his office, in Guy Bannister's office many times. It was Guy Bannister who ordered this documentation for Oswald. So it wasn't that odd that he didn't know anything about it, and he was interested in protecting Oswald, but he didn't want to be officially
Connected.
You know, that identified as being someone who was involved in the with the Fair Play for Cuba, you know, which was a communist front.
Yeah.
You know, Oswald may have not said it wasn't.
And that was a real touchy
Yeah,
subject back then. When we're talking nowadays, where you know,
it wouldn't mean a thing.
Yeah.
But in those days, I mean, everybody was paranoid about the
being labeled, being labeled communist.
Labeled a communist. I mean,
in Hollywood, everybody was being labeled that as well.
That was a kiss of death.
But it's so odd for a person nowadays, in this day and age, to really associate with what the importance of that was back then.
Oh yeah,
because nowadays it really wouldn't even really matter.
Look back, it seems ludicrous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that you'd be all this trouble and so forth, and but it was very real in those days, and this is what was happening. Of course, when we went over there, and I went in and talked to Lloyd Cobb and was talking to him about what George Reynolds had said and so forth, and about we were talking about the fact that Oswald had been arrested, and he was going to be giving out the pamphlets right there in front of the trademark, and of course Lloyd Cobb had said, well, John Lawrence, who was president of the trademark, he's going to go out there, he's going to go out and he's going to you know, clear the sidewalk. I mean, he's going to get him out in front of here, but we don't want that. So anyway, somebody thought he was important enough that they sent a television camera from WSDU TV in New Orleans. I think that's the name of the station, WSDU, I think so. But anyway, they sent a reporter by the name of Johann Rush over there to film this thing, which is another thing I really couldn't understand, you know. I mean, giving out leaflets, this happened in Los Angeles every day every day. Doesn't even raise an eyebrow. Why in the world would the television cameras be over there filming this? So, just as I came out of the Trade Mart, I look and I see there's a television camera out there filming. I ducked over to the right. I was leaving, getting out. And I thought, I didn't even think I was in the camera. Turned out later on that I was picked up. So, at that point, they were very concerned about, you see, Leroy Young and Bud Belcher, they were standing right there in that.
So they got in the picture.
They were right in the picture. Well, it looked like they were assisting him.
Well, did this picture go on the newspaper and everything, or on the news, or what?
Went on the news.
On the news.
And it's
on that New Orleans, on that state, on that
channel, you know. And it's interesting to, before I tell you what happened that day, which is one of the letters of documentation is a letter from me to Phil Twombly. What happened is, shortly after that, after this incident, Phil Twombly wrote a letter to George Reynolds and said he was really concerned that we were going to be identified, or certain of us was going to be identified from that these pictures had been taken. He got a very little cryptic note back from George Reynolds, which I have, which it said that, hey, the identification, what he said in there is, you go to the Potato Man, which was Lloyd Cobb. You go to the Potato Man and tell him we want this identification problem worked out. We don't want any of our employees or associates identified officially. He had no idea of what had transpired that day, other than that he had learned that. He got a cryptic note back from George Reynolds when she said that the matter had been taken care of. he dropped me a line. I happened to be up in Oxnard. He dropped me a line and said, you know, what the hell is all this all about? Do you know anything about this? In which case, I wrote him back the letter that is among our documents as to what transpired that day after this noontime filming. We went over, Guy Bannister, John Lawrence, Leroy Young, Bud Belcher, and I, and Leroy Young. Did I mention Leroy Young?
Yeah.
We went over to have a lunch at the restaurant that was downstairs from Guy Bannister's office. Now, John Lawrence at that time, we said, what happened? What happened there? You know, after this filming, what happened? As it turned out, a Mrs. Neely, who worked in the trademark, was standing beside Johann Rush when he was doing this filming. Rush asked her if she could identify any of those individuals, and the only individual that she could identify was John Lawrence, who was the head of the trademark.
So who was Mrs. Neely? She was
a secretary who worked in the trademark building.
Okay.
She just happened to be standing there beside Johann Rush when he took the film. So she said, "We've got a guy by the name of Brady who works in the trademark. I really don't remember what his, if I ever knew what his position was, but of course he was underneath Lawrence and those guys. Said that W.C. Brady could probably identify all those people there. So, well, naturally he couldn't identify us. But anyway, John Lawrence went to W.C. Brady and said, "Hey, you know, I'll take care of it. You forget about it. I'll take care of it." Now, apparently what happened is W.C. Brady, the minute this confrontation, this is some of these other strange things are happening. The minute that this confrontation really started, or this filming started out there, and there really wasn't a confrontation, this guy called up the FBI. Now, the FBI agent that he called was a guy by the name of Warren DeBruys, B-R-U-E-Y-S, Bruys, who was buddy with Lloyd Cobb and all those guys. They had him in his pocket. They referred to him as their friendly FBI agent. Apparently, he had the responsibility of keeping an eye on Oswald. So,
keeping an eye on him, huh?
yeah, keep an eye on him. Now, why all this? We couldn't understand. As a matter of fact, I could not understand, and I even indicated in my letter to Twombly, I don't know what all this interest in Lee Harvey Oswald is. He's an interesting kid to talk to because of his background of having been in Russia and that sort of thing. But beyond that, I can't see what all this fuss. This just seems like a fuss over nothing. And I still don't understand. Well, you understand now.
Well, yeah, now you do.
Now you do, because they had big plans for him. But anyway, John Lawrence then went out and went over to the station, and he looked at the still shots that they from that filming. Well, he identified there was 3 guys there that, or there was 3 guys there that you were actually really concerned about. You know, they caught Bud Belcher on film, and they caught Leroy Young on film. So, but there was all the other, besides that, there was another guy that hadn't been identified. so hadn't been identified. So Lawrence was going to identify these people. So he said that these two guys are maintenance people. They work in their maintenance building. One of them, he gave me his last name, couldn't even remember his first name. But anyway, he said, now these two guys are, this is me, he said, I'm here. And of course they knew that there was an Oriental there that somebody else had already identified, was there. His name was O'Mara. So somebody had identified him. So this left these others unidentified, two of whom were Bud Belcher and Leroy Young, and then there was a third guy standing there that we didn't know who he was. But anyway, he identified he identified two of them. Lawrence identified two of them as maintenance men from inside the building. Okay, that's they just took his word for that. The other guy, he said, oh, he's a friend. He was standing next to him. He said, he's a friend of mine. His name's Nick, and he's a room clerk down at the Royal Orleans Hotel. He just happened to be he happened to be in my office when this happened, and we went out, and I went out to clear the sidewalk. This accounted for, together with Oswald and the guy he had hired to help him, got him from the Department of Employment. This accounted for everybody except me, and I'm coming out there. He doesn't identify it initially. He doesn't really identify me at that time. So after this happened, and when Lawrence tells us all of this at the meeting, at the luncheon meeting, and he says, this guy, they're coming out there, he said, it looks remarkably like you. But he said it also looks like Jess Core, who's a PR man there, and he admitted to the FBI agent that he had gone outside. So he says, in all probability, based on that, the FBI agent, who's our friend anyway, is going to identify him as the PR man.
Well, that worked out.
And that's what happens in the letter, which you haven't seen, but that's the letter that's a letter in actually in November. It didn't happen until in November, because in October, Warren DeBuse submitted a report in which he identified all those people as the same ones that John Lawrence had said. So that effectively closed that off. That closed the issue. When the matter came up with the Warren Commission, they identified those people. That he knew that those maintenance men were going to,
And so that answered your question on why everybody needed to be, why you don't want the publicity and why you don't want anybody there and why everybody has to be explained.
Yeah.
And
so that is what happened during that little foray in August. That was the last time, the only time. Those two times, those are the only two times that I met Oswald. I had a few words to say to him, but other than that, I never met him. And then, of course, in the latter part of November, things really began to heat up.
yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, they did. We started. We were told that there was going to be some kind of incident that was going to take place in Dallas or in Texas. They said first. That's going to happen in Texas in the fall. Possibility was that something also might take place in Miami. They had but in the fall was going to be. We had
Was
produced.
Kennedy supposed to tour Miami at all?
He did tour Miami.
Oh, he did?
He did it around the 9th of November. We prepared a lot of documentation and IDs for the Miami operation, the same as we did for Dallas. It just so happens that what happened is that a police informant had told them about a conversation that he had with an individual in which he had stated that Kennedy was going to be killed, and he's going to be shot from a building with a high-powered rifle. And so in Miami, what they did in Miami was they didn't have the motorcade. They whisked him to the place where they're having the meeting by helicopter. So that ended that. But these guys always have an alternate plan. So anyway, they started concentrating on Texas, where he was going to make actually 4 stops, ending in Dallas. So there was a lot of conversation, a lot of lot of communication back and forth, much more than normal. But there's years when we have no communication at all. You can't find one single document, one single letter. But in '63, there were quite a few letters preserved in that period of time, and it started with indicated that he would be coming to Dallas. We didn't know the exact date, but about 6 months, about June of '63, we learned that one of the stops was going to be Dallas. We didn't know the exact date, and we were told that that an incident was going to be created, which would inject a little life back into the anti-Castro program. See, what happened at that time, Kennedy was being very duplicitous in regard to Cuba. On the one hand, he was telling the survivors of the 2506 Brigade, they were the ones who landed at the Bay of Pigs. He was telling them that the brigade flag was going to would be flown again in a free Cuba, that they weren't going to let up on Castro, and they were going to vigorously pursue that because you couldn't live with a dictator like that 90 miles from home. On the other hand, he was romancing Castro. I mean, he was having through his emissary William Atwood, they were having meetings with the representatives of Castro, trying to accommodate Castro and to improve relations between Cuba and the United States. Well, it turned out what happened was the CIA had bugged Atwood's phone, and that while he was doing all this talking, the CIA was listening in. Well, the CIA really didn't like that at all. They were intent on pursuing their program of getting rid of Castro. As a matter of fact, I mean, they delivered arms to an assassin the very day of Kennedy's assassination. Now, so not only that,
delivered arms to
a Cuban assassin by the name of Rolando Cubella, who was actually living in Cuba at that time, and they had assigned him. Actually, they had signed him a name. He was known as A.M. Lash, A.M. Lash, and that was his job, was to kill Castro. And a high-level member, I mean a very high-level member of the CIA, Desmond Fitzgerald, met with him in Paris on the very day that Kennedy was assassinated. So the CIA wasn't really giving up on him. Besides the CIA, were especially mad at him because they thought he had betrayed them, at the Bay of Pigs, for not ordering a second strike. He had fired Allen Dulles and his chief, and Richard Bissell, who was the head of that program, and they were mad about that. And then they were really scared because it looked like that Kennedy was going to win re-election by a landslide, and if he did, it seemed to be common knowledge that he was going to move Bobby Kennedy from being Attorney General, and he was going to move him over to CIA Director, because he had said one time that Bobby Kennedy should have appointed him CIA Director instead of the Attorney General. Now, CIA, they didn't like that. These are all these things that the CIA had against him, and whereas the higher ups in the CIA may not have carried it to the point where they wanted to assassinate him, but you remember, all down the line, you've got a whole bunch of contract agents. These contract agents will work for anybody. Organized crime, the Cubans, the CIA, they work for anybody who's willing to pay them. So, and they harbored this same resentment. So if somebody wanted to orchestrate an assassination, they wouldn't have any trouble getting these guys, to work for them. Even knowing these guys who actually knew it was going to be an assassination. Of course, it wouldn't be easy to be, with the need to know restrictions. It wasn't hard to get someone involved and pulled into a plot that they had no idea what it was all about. Now, at least I didn't have the slightest idea that anyone ever thought about assassinating the president, because...
But you were pulled into that little plot too, so...
That fact, and probably we may have been patsies in the thing, just as Lee Harvey Oswald was, because of the fact that, but that's really a little bit down the road. So...
Sorry, you're talking about when you're arrested and everything? And...
No, not after I was arrested. During...
well, we can get to that, I'm sorry.
At the time of the assassination. We're talking about early November and what was happening. We're in the process of purchasing a Gulfstream, which is a very plush airplane, a turboprop airplane, that we would probably have used this airplane instead of the airplane we used in going over there if we could have taken delivery of it in time, but we didn't. But anyway, we started in November. We started getting these. We'd been told that there was going to be an incident. It was going to happen in the latter part of November. We didn't know the exact date, but we would have to be ready on very short notice to prepare Secret Service credentials, and especially the little lapel recognition pin that all the Secret Service agents wore. That we must be prepared to complete the work and deliver it on very, very short notice. And as a matter of fact, we didn't find out until somewhere around the 16th of November. Now, the idea originally was, when we were planning this trip, we had purchased, or George Reynolds had purchased for us, an airplane over in Texas, and someone was going to fly it into Redbird Airport, which is in the greater Dallas area. It was either Leroy Young or perhaps David Ferry flew it in. They were going to fly it in, and they would leave it there for us. We would pick it up. Another pilot and I, who was a contract agent by the name of Joe Canty, we were scheduled to fly over. We were going to fly over, and we were going to make this delivery. We were going to. He would fly one airplane back, and I would fly the other one back. We received in the early part of November. We received a note from Peter Licavoli, in which Licavoli indicated that Charlie Nicoletti and Leo Masuri was there at the ranch. He was informing me that he had picked up this large station wagon that we were looking for, and he picked it up with I had a temporary ID identification there. I had a genuine driver's license, but in the name of John O'Malley and other credentials in the name of John O'Malley. He bought the station wagon in the name of John O'Malley, and that he had acquired the station wagon, which would be ideal for carrying paintings back and forth between Tucson and Beverly Hills, because we were in the art business. So he informed us that he had the station wagon, but that Charlie Nicoletti and Leo Masuri, longtime associates of his. Charlie Nicoletti was a high-ranking member of the Chicago organized crime. Leo Masuri was another high-ranking member of organized crime that had been associated with Licavoli himself for over 40 years. He'd known him for all this time. So they were there, and apparently at the ranch, and they were on their way to New Orleans, and they wanted me to give them a ride to New Orleans. And he indicated in there, he said be sure and stop by. I wasn't scheduled to go by. So we stopped. Also, he had some guns there that we decided that we would take to Dallas and deliver to an associate over there who had a gun shop by the name of John Mason. As long as we were stopping at the Grace Ranch anyway, you might as well pick them up. But when we got there, we discovered, we flew over, and I owned a plane which was a four-place Cessna 175, and of course, although it was a four-place airplane, if you got 4 adults in it,
four-place means four seats.
Four seats, yeah. If you had 4 adults in there and you had a lot of luggage, I mean, you were dangerously overloaded.
Yeah.
So we got there and we thought, well, we couldn't take these guns and all this luggage that they had, because they had some heavy luggage which they didn't want to. They weren't about to leave behind. I don't know what it was, but they weren't about to leave it behind. So we decided that what the hell, we'll just drive, because we can. It only takes 20 hours driving. If we drive alternating, we shouldn't have any problem. And we would arrive in Dallas on Thursday night, and we were to go to the Cabana Hotel.
What was the date of that, Thursday night?
Thursday night, November 21st.
Okay.
That we'd be there November 21st on the Thursday night, and then we would go to the Cabana Hotel, and we would deliver all of this documentation to a man by the name of Homer Echeverria. Echeverria was was a Cuban who hated Kennedy just about as much as anyone. He was associated with a guy by the name of Paulino Sierra in Chicago. Paulino Sierra was an interesting guy. He had lived in He lived in Havana and so forth. He was a lawyer, and he represented United Car, but he was going around at that time telling all these Cubans that he was putting together a new expeditionary force to Cuba. Well, of course, the Cubans, you know, they were hungry for that sort of thing, and that's what they believed. So we were to deliver these this documentation to Echeverria, figuring it supposedly, I mean, he would probably distribute it, and he was probably heading up the organization that was going to start a little, you know, a little demonstration. So that's all it would probably be would be a demonstration. So Canty and I and Charlie and Leo left Tucson, and we ran into, well, first of all, we had outside Lordsburg, we had car trouble. We had to wait. We blew a hose that they didn't have, so I had to wait for that. That delayed us a little bit. Then, just outside El Paso, we ran into a sandstorm that was so bad. I mean, you had to stop. It took the paint right off the car.
Oh my gosh!
So we had to wait. We had to wait that out. So this threw us in there, so that we didn't get into till Dallas until the next morning. However, we had.
Oh, I bet your superiors were mad though.
Well, we had an alternate plan.
Oh, really?
And I'm sure they had an alternate plan.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, they've always got these alternate plans. Yeah.
I've heard this plan A, plan B, plan C, and
yeah. Suppose let's say that Oswald was a you know integral part of this assassination plot.
yeah.
Okay. Suppose he gets sick and he can't come to work on Friday morning. That might happen. Suppose he's in an accident and something happened. Suppose Frazier, who's bringing him into work from out in Irving, Texas, suppose they have a flat tire, or suppose the car breaks down. I mean, these guys don't depend upon that sort of thing. They have to have a second. So you can bet your sweet life that they had 2 and 3 plans ready. So,
yeah.
But anyway, they'd like it to go smoothly and have plan A be operative.
You think it went smoothly to where A was the one? Do you think they used?
Yeah, oh yeah.
You think it was A worked?
Well, it didn't.
I mean, I know you don't know for sure, but
no, it didn't go smooth. But I'm sure the A plan was the one that's in operation. So, but we got there and we'd been instructed as, hey, go straight to Dealey Plaza. We didn't even know what in the hell Dealey Plaza was. As a matter of fact, a guy by the name of Whitlock sent me a little description of Dealey Plaza. Whitlock was a contract agent that maintained a safe house there in Dallas, which we could go to and, you know, and be relatively safe. We didn't have to stay in a hotel or anything when we were in Dallas. So, but he had sent me a thing as to where it was in relation to Stemmons Freeway and all the roads around there, so we'd know how to get in there. So what we would do was that Echeverria was to park his station wagon in the. He was supposed to park it in the station in the parking lot, and we had a set of master keys. We were told the license plate, the Texas plates, what it was. We were to go in the parking lot, unlock the car, the pickup truck, put the valise in there, and simply walk away. We were told that we were to remain in a, quote, support position until after the motorcade. Whatever that means, I have no idea. I don't even have an idea today what support is. It's very, very vague, but when you're given instructions, this is what you do. You follow instructions down to the letter. So we remained in there.
And you hope that they don't make a mistake.
Yeah, then we was to meet as a sort of a little, I thought was a little side issue. We were to deliver some IDs and 2 guns and two other individuals who would identify themselves at Dealey Plaza. I had met both of these individuals before. One of them I had...
You had or had not?
I had. One of these individuals I had actually met face to face and seen him face to face. The other, this was a guy named Richard Montoya. Richard Montoya I had met at Orlando Piedra's house on Pine Tree Drive in Miami. You know, Piedra was the former police chief of Havana.
Havana, yeah.
And I just assumed that, you know, he was there and he spoke very good Spanish. I assumed that he was probably that he was probably one of Piedra's bodyguards. But I'd met him, so I had seen him, but that had been about 2 years prior, so, I mean, I hadn't seen him since then. I only got that look at him. But anyway, he was supposed to be there. The other man was supposed to be Charles Harrelson. Now, Harrelson was a very notorious Texas gunman, in California too, for that matter. And although I had never met him face to face, we had done some, we had produced some forged documents for him a couple of years prior, using a name of Terry Southern, which was one of his aliases. Once when I was with another individual and we went to make a delivery at John Mason's gun shop in Dallas, I went in. I had never met Mason face to face. Haven't to this day. You know, we did a lot of business together. But the guy said, "Dude," he was a Texan. He said, "Let's go over to Mason's and you get a look at Mason." Well, when I went in, I mean, I saw Mason. I thought he was Lee Harvey Oswald. I mean, they looked so much alike.
Really?
Or when I saw Oswald, I thought it was Mason. You know, they were just like twins. And there's another gentleman in there, and he was pointed out to me by this guy, and he says, "That guy's Charles Harrelson. He's a partner with Mason in this gun shop." So that's the only time I had seen him. Very fleeting type thing. But he walked up.
And Harrelson, nowadays being 1997, that is the father of Woody Harrelson, the actor, correct?
He's the guy's doing 40 years in prison for shooting Judge Wood, which so isn't it? It's interesting. It's a kind of a sideline, but Harrelson, he's charged with shooting Judge Wood. When he comes to trial, the trial judge, William Sessions, who later became the FBI director and then was fired, he was a federal judge at that time. He presided at the trial. He had been one of the pallbearers at Judge Wood's funeral. Not only that, they were in a building, being tried in the building with Wood's name on it. It was the Woods Federal Building. Now you think that, how you like that for having the deck stacked against you, you know? So every ruling that they ever had, you know, of course went against Harrelson. But anyway, we came up. Harrelson walked up to me, and before I could say a thing, he said to me, he said, "Oh, Mr. O'Malley." And I said, "Yes." And he says, "I'm Charles Harrelson." And I said, "No, you're not Charles Harrelson. You're Charles Harper," because that's the name of the documentation that we had. We had some deep cover documentation for them, including guns for Montoya. We had a pilot's license and a lot of documents, you know, that would birth certificates and so forth. And obviously these names they were intended to use for a long time. They weren't going to use them just to go down the road a little way. So I gave him the documents, I gave him the guns, and they strolled away. And then we're talking about getting close to 11:30, and the motorcade was due to come by about 12:25, so we're told till 12:25.
And you gave him documentation, and you gave him guns? Why were you giving him guns?
They wanted guns. We were gun suppliers.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I mean, they said, hey, can you bring us over? Harrelson wanted a 41 caliber Smith & Wesson. And Richard Montoya wanted a little pocket pistol, a 25 auto. And he asked if we had those two in our inventory, could we get them, bring them over. So we did. I guess they wanted to be armed for some reason or another. So we finally...
Just wanted to clarify that if this is leading to the assassination of the president, and handing guns to somebody is not...
Yeah, handing them out.
But this was not the type of gun he was shot with anyway, so let's continue.
Oh, okay. So after we'd done this, I wandered around, and I saw an individual that came up and looked like the description of Homer Echeverry. I saw him come up and unlock the pickup truck, get in it with and drive off with the documents. I'm not sure if he drove off or not. He may have left that. I know he took the police out. I think he actually walked away. But anyway, because I think the pickup truck was there after the assassination. But then we...
But anyway, you know that your drop was acknowledged and...
Yeah, we knew, we assumed that that's who he was. I thought he had the keys to the thing. And so one of the individuals that we saw parked at the entrance to the parking area was a very, very notorious assassin by the name of Aldo Vera Serafin. He was sitting in a Ford there. Looked to me like he was talking on the radio with someone else, and we knew him quite well. And I wandered up near the corner of Elm Street and Houston, and looking to see, if there's any people up there you knew or anything. Like, we saw a lot of Latin types. So
you were just trying to figure out what was going to go on,
yeah, well, we didn't know. We just thought we were waiting for although it sort of surprised me that you're going to have a confrontation, and we don't see any signs or placards or anything at all, and that's sort of puzzling. But we thought perhaps it'd be something else, after all. And so I wandered around, and then I went back behind near my car and near the picket fence, and of course we could finally hear it. And of course I had a radio, and I could monitor what was going on, and I would listen to the motorcade and so forth. The motorcade was due to come by at 12:25. Actually, it was 5 minutes late because Kennedy had stopped somewhere to shake some hands with some children and so forth. So it was 5 minutes late. Actually, he was due at the trademark for the luncheon at 12:30. So at about 12:30, I hear this first shot, which is a very weak shot. It didn't even sound like it was a rifle shot at all.
Like a balloon pop or something?
Yeah, something like that,
yeah.
Or like a firecracker or a cherry bomb or something like that. But the next shots left no doubt. There's about 3 or 4 shots in rapid succession, and then of course everything was chaos.
And where were you standing at this point?
I was standing behind the picket fence, Now, we have been instructed that what we were to do, and we were carrying BATF.
What does that stand for?
Credential, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
Okay.
And we were supposed to be working undercover investigating an illegal arms shipment, and which was supposed to be in was supposed to be in a boxcar there. And so we were told that if anything happens, you know, go and get in this boxcar.
So obviously something happened, huh?
Yeah, obviously something happened. But this was another confusing thing. I mean, when the first half of your inclination is to just run.
Yeah.
I mean, just run. But then, after all, you'd had instructions and you wanted to follow your instructions. The more you think about it, you realize that this may have been a part of a second, an alternate plan. For instance, I mean, also, the minute I get to the boxcar, to get in the boxcar, there is Charles Harrelson and Richard Montoya. Obviously, they have been told the same thing, which really surprised me. And of course, we brought that up later, is the fact that...
Were they out of breath or anything, or obviously had been there for a little while?
No, they didn't seem to be out of breath or anything, no more than I was. And that's one of the things we brought up later, and I brought up later with Phil Twombly, is why in the world that you would depend upon someone like get somebody into a plot like Charles Harrelson, who was a notorious addict, you know, and
addict of what? Drugs?
Narcotic addict.
Huh.
And totally, totally unreliable.
Isn't that funny? Because his son now, Charles Harrelson, Woody Harrelson, is now promoting pot, marijuana, going around,
you know. Oh, want to get it legalized?
Yeah, he's smoking it, going and lecturing at schools now, smoking it on the campuses.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Anyway, so they had this notorious, he was notorious for that.
Yeah, but I brought this up with Twombly later. Twombly told me that wasn't his idea to do this. So obviously there was things going on that even Twombly wasn't privy to. So we go and jump in this car. Now, the more you reflect on it, you think, well, maybe as a part of a different scenario, if things go wrong, here we've got 3 notorious individuals in this boxcar. Suppose they blow up the boxcar.
Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, they would find us. They would find us there. Case closed, because they say that these guys obviously did the shooting. And, and you got guns on, and this, that, and the other. So.
Oh, what a terrifying experience.
So this happened. So we were in that boxcar by, 12:33 or 12:34, really quick, and we did not. We weren't taken out of the boxcar until about 3 o'clock. By the time we were taken out of the boxcar, Lee Harvey Oswald had already been arrested, and as far as the FBI went, I mean, the case was effectively closed. That in itself, that saved us, was the fact that
somebody had already been arrested.
And they had already Hoover had practically proclaimed it and he had given specific instructions to Gordon Shanklin. So when we were detained and taken across Dealey Plaza and we were turned over to a deputy sheriff named Elkins. Elkins called up Fritz, who was chief of police. He came over from the building and from police headquarters, and he said, "Well, take him in to see Gordon Shanklin." So we went in to see Gordon Shanklin, and we went through our little song and dance about what we were doing and so forth, and showed him our credentials, which he just sort of glanced at and everything, because he really wasn't interested at that time in muddying the water. They were interested in getting people out of the way instead of clouding it up with other suspects. So he said, "Well, would you mind if we photograph the guns?" Because we had well, they didn't have any interesting weapons, but I had a couple of very interesting weapons that you don't see every day. So we said, sure. So they took pictures of the guns. Later on, an ex-FBI agent, through his connections in the Dallas Police Department, got us copies of the photographs. Well, he went through the files to see if he could find anything on us, and he did find the photographs, and he sent the photographs to us. You know, he didn't send the negative, couldn't find the negative, but he did find the print, so he sent to us. Of course, then they released us. So Harrelson and Montoya, they went their own way. I don't know where they went. So I called up first I called up the Cabana Hotel I was going to talk to Jim Braden or Morgan Brown, two Californians who that was at the Cabana, and matter of fact, Morgan Brown was the brother of Melvin Brown, who was a close associate of Phil Twombly. So they were there at that time, but we called up and they said that we called them at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, and they said that Morgan Brown had already checked out of the hotel. Jim Braden hadn't checked out, so we were trying to get a ride to the ride out to Redbird, because I didn't want to try to drive my own up my own.
You just want to get out of there, huh?
Yeah, I didn't want to do that. And, so finally, I got a hold of the guy who was a contract agent there, Michael Whitlock, and he came and gave us a ride out to Redbird Airport, and then he said that he would go back to Dealey Plaza later on after things cleared out. He'd go back to Dealey Plaza, take the car, drive the car to and deliver the guns over to John Mason, which we had intended to do, and then he would drive the car to Morgan City, Louisiana, and turn it over to George Reynolds, which he did. And he later on I got a letter from him later on stating that he had delivered the guns, which were to be delivered to an anti-Castro bunch called the Alpha 66, and he had driven the car down to Morgan City. I ended up selling the station wagon to Leroy Young, and then of course we went out, and all this time, of course, Joe Canty, he's out at Redbird Airport. We'd taken him out there earlier to check out the airplane and that sort of thing. So he had refueled the airplane, was running it up, everything, and we had expected to be out of there by 1 o'clock, and he'd been revving the engine up so much out there that so forth that they had complaints from all the residents around there, because at that time there's houses all around Redbird Airport. There aren't now, but at that time they were close to the runway, and they were complaining.
Okay, on the end of our last tape and filming, you were already ending the day of the assassination of Kennedy, and you kind of explained all that. But I want to go back. Let's go back a little bit. In reviewing some of the information, you had mentioned a gentleman's name by the name of John Mason, and you mentioned his name several times. If you can elaborate a little bit on who he was, what his position was, etc. And then I want to move forward again, getting a little bit more regarding the assassination.
Well, John Mason was a Dallas gun dealer. Although he operated from a very unpretentious facility in Dallas, didn't look like much, but he did.
Was it food?
No, no, it wasn't food.
That's shocking.
Yeah. But no, he furnished he furnished a lot of guns to some of the most violent anti-Castro groups in Dallas and throughout that area, like Alpha 66, Commando L.
Alpha, what are these that you're, oh,
I don't know how they get Alpha 66.
oh really?
I don't know how they got Commando L.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the name of the group. They're well known. Manuel Rodriguez was the head of Alpha 66, and then we had Commando L. Then we had other groups that didn't have these names. That they were all violent, anti-Castro groups.
And they were being supplied guns.
And what happened was that they were being supplied guns mainly through Masons, and he got them from a lot of sources, including us, because we had sources for all kinds of hardware. But he was in 1963. Our first request from him came. He wanted us to acquire all the various models of the Mannlicher Carcano rifle to evaluate. There's about seven different models of the Mannlicher Carcano. Now, Mannlicher was one of the really great. He was a great Austrian gun maker who made very high-performance guns, but he didn't actually have anything to do with this gun. The only thing that in this Mannlicher Carcano was the magazine. He designed the magazine, but he did not have anything to do with the production of the rifle otherwise. I don't know why they stuck the name Mannlicher on it, because of his name, I suppose. But it was one of the poorest made guns that the military rifles ever produced, according to all reports. And so we took this. We took these various models, which we acquired from Sam Cummins, who ran a front of the CIA over on called Western Surplus over on Arroyo Seco, and we acquired these guns from him for $5 a piece.
Wow!
Would give you an idea how cheap they were. He would sell them to you in lots of 25 for $3 a piece. Sam Cummins eventually, as a sidelight, Sam Cummins eventually became the world's greatest, largest private arms dealer. He finally moved to Europe and everything, but he used this connection with the CIA and this as a springboard to it. So we took these rifles and we began evaluating them, doing studies of muscle velocity, that sort of thing, and using heavy loads, light loads, ultra heavy loads. Then we received a request from him. He sent us some bullets of the Mannlicher, the 6.5 Mannlicher Carcano, and which, if you look at them, which we were to reload in a special case. If you look at these bullets, they looked as though they had never been fired, but on closer examination, you could see that they had been fired at least once, and they'd been fired into wadding or into water or something, so as not to deform the bullet. And we were instructed to load these 6.5 that had been fired into a Western 264 cartridge case. Now 264 the bullet is the same size as 6.5, and it could be fired from a quality, high quality rifle such as the Remington. In speculating, you were thinking that probably that the ballistics would be so messed up, and if they were examining it ballistically, they would conclude that this was fired from the Mannlicher Carcano, because it normally would be in that rifle. Also, they were asking us how we were coming along with our experiments on this Sabot, spelled S-A-B-O-T. The Sabot idea has been around was around for a long time in artillery shells and that sort of thing. It's where they have a smaller projectile fired from a much larger case, and the Sabot was a plastic insert that fit into the case, and it would drop off about 10 or 15 feet out, which you would be able to fire from a heavy rifle, a smaller projectile, giving it a flatter trajectory. Experiments in the Sabot was just sort of beginning then, and it's obvious that they had some kind of an idea for that, delivering a different bullet from a different fired case. Also, we did some Mexican reloading for them, Mexican cases. That's when the case is necked down, and you take a larger casing and you neck it down, and then the smaller bullet goes into it. It usually, well, you can deliver it fairly efficiently, but it's not nearly as accurate as anything else because of the fact that the lands and grooves not being right for it. But anyway, all of this experimentation indicated to us that somehow that Mason had some kind of a project going, and it is obvious that he was somehow involved in the assassination. To what extent, I have no idea, but he was very, very important to it. He finally ran afoul of the law and was convicted of arms violations and so forth. He was the...
Who did he work under?
No, he worked for himself.
He just worked for himself?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he obviously received orders here, received orders there, and so forth. But I mean, as far as I know, he was self-employed, and but of course, naturally, he took orders from someone. When they ordered, they wanted this and they wanted that, and it would be pure speculation as to who that was. Now, Mason was the guy that was the look-alike. He looked exactly like
Oswald, didn't he?
The Army Oswald.
Yeah.
It was almost a dead ringer for him. And if you'd have seen a picture of the two of them, you'd have thought it was the same guy.
Really?
Yeah. So I just wanted to...
Were they around the same age too, or just...
Yeah, the same age. So I just wanted to comment on that in passing of that part of the stuff that we were doing at that time. So we were doing a lot of stuff during the summer of '63. And
what kind of... what kind of gun killed President Kennedy?
We don't know. They say, of course, that the Mannlicher Carcano did it.
They do.
But they have no direct evidence of it. Two bullet fragments were found inside the limousine. Ironically, they were found inside the limousine under the seat after the car had been cleaned twice. The third time they had it in Washington after they had flown the car up there, and they discovered these two bullet fragments, which they tested ballistically, and they supposedly came from the Mannlicher Carcano that Oswald was supposed to have used that day.
So the gun in the book depository?
The book depository.
Did they find a gun there?
They found a 6.5 Carcano, Mannlicher Carcano. There was also rumors that they found another gun. If the gun they found the first time was identified as a Mauser, then they later on said no, it wasn't a Mauser, it wasn't a Mannlicher Carcano. There's so many questions about about the handling of the evidence inside the book depository and so forth, which would made it impossible for them to have convicted Oswald if he had ever come to trial. That it's not, it isn't really productive to, you know, to go into that too deeply for the simple reason we could be here a week.
Oh, yeah.
And all that has been rehashed and rehashed and rehashed and rehashed.
But the one point that you do talk about, that I just think is, as if this is how I remember it, is that the person who had to have, if this was Oswald, okay, which we know it is not, but let's say Oswald was up there, and just in brief, he had finished his lunch, correct? He went up to, supposedly to this floor, squeezed through a lot of boxes that were very, very difficult. You had to squeeze through them. He fired off, they're not sure of how many rounds, but they fired off a few rounds and still loaded the gun without firing the gun, leaving a bullet, which that takes time. Squeezed after the killing, the shooting, he had to squeeze back through some books, run down some stairs, which they did have people who were actually standing on the stairs at the time, 2 older women or something, or is that, am I following that correctly?
Yeah, he immediately after the firing, apparently he chambered a new round, which was the last round, and actually the magazine should have fallen out. They claimed the magazine was in it, and it was and it had malfunctioned, didn't fall out. But in any event, he would do that. He had to have wiped off his fingerprints off the gun. He can't squeeze back out through those boxes, and there's boxes all over the place. Made his way over to a corner of the book depository, hid the rifle, and he didn't just throw the rifle. I mean, he put it down so they had a hard time finding it, a hard time getting it out. Then he ran down the stairs, and each set of stairs you had to go into the floor below. You couldn't just go down the stairs. There was 2 women that were using the stairs at the same time. They didn't see him. There was 4 people on the 5th floor. None of them saw him. One guy who was standing, actually he would have come within 10 feet of him as he came in to go downstairs. None of these people saw him, and when he was encountered by the police, he was standing, drinking a Coke, without being out of breath or anything, within a 90-second period of time.
90 seconds.
90 seconds.
Boy,
So-
the guy was real healthy.
So, yeah. So,
well, I don't want to get all into that, but I did want to hear.
There's so much, and that, you know, that has been gone over and over and over and over by ones who have made a study of what happened inside the book depository. So,
well, I just wanted to touch on that a little.
You know, the thing would be incredible. He was seen downstairs at almost at 12:30. He's down there eating his lunch. Now, here's a man that's going to kill the most powerful man in the world. Upstairs somewhere, he's got secreted, we don't know where and how, he's got secreted a disassembled gun, which he has no tools actually to put it together. So he's sitting there very calmly eating his lunch. First of all, he doesn't know when the cavalcade is actually going to come by.
And wasn't he late for work or something that day? Maybe I'm wrong.
No,
he wasn't late.
No, he was. He was.
Eating his lunch.
He was sitting there calmly eating his lunch. He's going to kill the most powerful man in the world. He doesn't know exactly when the cavalcade is coming by. As a matter of fact, the motorcade was supposed to have come by at 12:25. It was late because Kennedy got off at some point to shake hands with his children. If it had come by the depository at when he's supposed to, he would have been sitting downstairs. So all of that stuff is just, there's so much evidence.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
you could spend a week and there's no point to to go in there. It's just it's really non-productive.
Well, also, though, it does seem, though, that a lot of the people that have investigated it, and then they're experts, not many have had the same experiences and involvement surrounding being there at the time that.
Yeah, it's true, but of course.
I mean, you didn't know them, you don't know what happened, you're just,
I wasn't
yeah.
inside the book depository. We're
No.
talking about what happened in there. I only know what happened outside, and all I know is that, you know, I know that there was more than 3 shots because I heard them.
Yeah.
I know they appeared to me to come from different directions. Even one seemed like it was either, perhaps even a different caliber gun, was a much louder report. All of that I know from being in the position that I was in. But other than that, I'm as ignorant of what happened inside the book depository as anyone else, although all you have to do is read the testimony. Of course, I was fortunate enough, of course, to end up, or having been a close associate of a lawyer who ended up on the Warren Commission, and I had occasion to talk to him later in 1964 after the.
Well, what an opportunity! First time
after the report had been submitted, or even before the Warren Commission report had been submitted. You know, I talked to him and argued with him. I argued a lot about the very things that we're talking about now, inside of what happened inside the book depository. But that's farther on down the road.
Uh-huh.
So
well, as for your day there, I'm when we last filmed, let's back up. You left. You followed your orders. You went back to the railroad car, and you found that the other 2 agents that had been the other 2 agents were there.
Yeah.
As they followed, they were instructed the exact same thing as you were.
Apparently so.
And when you were in that car, that railroad car,
Yeah.
I want to know what you're feeling.
Well, of course.
I mean, you got to be scared out of your.
Of course you were absolutely. You couldn't describe the terror that went through you, because you, especially after you realized from the radio that Kennedy had been killed, and then I mean you saw this was coming to the end. Not only were you worried about that, I mean you might be lynched right on the spot.
Yeah.
I mean those Texas people over there, they might have torn you limb from limb.
Yeah.
This had happened. So I mean these crowds get volatile and so forth. And at the very least, you figure you're going to be arrested and tried for murder, conspiracy to commit murder. And there's no way that, and of course, sitting in there huddled in this damn boxcar, which has some explosives in it, you know, because we found, claymore mines, fragmentation grenades, det cord, something that looked like C4. This sort of thing, and as soon as I saw this, then of course they'd say, "Oh well, you're investigating an illegal arms shipment for your cover." But somebody had to put that stuff in there, and
why?
Yeah, and why? Because then you figure out. Can you imagine what would happen if something had gone wrong with plan number 1, and somebody decided to push the plunger, and they blew up that damn boxcar.
For plan 2, yeah.
And they would have, you would have been killed when they found enough parts to identify. Then they would have said, "Hey, look at these 3 guys, you know."
And then you would have been
all with
blamed.
notorious reputation. The case would have been closed. But of course, before this didn't come to pass because of the fact that Oswald ended up getting himself shot. So because Oswald must have been somehow involved in something, maybe not in the conspiracy to kill the president. I don't think he ever knew that, would have contemplated that. I mean, he might as well he might as well just sat right down there and waited for them to arrest him and and proclaim that he did it. I mean, everything.
If he would have known, he would have been a lot more nervous and not eating his lunch and everything else.
Yeah, he never. He acted as though, always acted as though a person who was very self-confident, and he felt that someone was going to come to his rescue, and I think that's what he felt before, you know, before they decided to silence him, you know. So,
so you're in.
But anyway, you can't imagine. You just can't imagine. You can't imagine the terror that that went through you, you know. And of course you were trying to monitor the radio to try to find out what was going on. You heard all the conflicting stories and the conflicting calls. We heard the first call when somebody was said to have fled the book depository, and although they later said that was what led to Oswald's arrest, the description of the man certainly didn't fit Oswald, and said he was carrying a .30-30 rifle, which is certainly not the Van Licker Carcano. So much of that stuff was going on and everything. Then we heard about the shooting in out in when Tibbet, the policeman, got shot, and then we got out of there. I think I said before. I think I mentioned once before that we were arrested about 3 o'clock. No, we were arrested about at 2 o'clock, because we were arrested just about the same time that Oswald was arrested.
So how did that happen? I mean, you're sitting in the car. What happened? Did the doors open and there were police, or?
Yeah, they just threw the door open, and there's guys there with about 50 shotguns.
Oh my!
And they dragged us out, you know. And
now, how do you think that they got word of three people in there?
Well, what happened is, no, they didn't get word. Actually, what happened, they had searched the train before, but it appeared to be locked. Somebody, the train actually started to move, and it moved up the track a ways, and then and of course we were going to jump off, but it moved up the track a ways, and then it backed down the same way that we came from. Of course, we didn't think anything about that, because that's a switching yard, so we thought they were being switched onto a different track. But apparently somebody had gone up, and a guy tried to catch the train up in a gondola type car, and the guy at in the tower had called and said stop the train. Somebody was on the train, so they decided to search the train again. So this time, I guess they decided to open this, to actually try this car and see if it was locked, which it wasn't. So anyway, they dragged us out, and of course the head of the detail was a guy named Sergeant Harkness, and so we told Harkness our little we went in our song and dance, and he turned us over to a couple. Song
and dance for why you're there, for the illegal.
Yeah, why we were there, and that we were. You know, we were with a BATF, and we were investigating an illegal arms shipment. And so he turned us over to a couple of cops by the name of Marvin Weiss and Billy Bass, and told him to take us over and turn us over to Deputy Sheriff Elkins, who was in charge of a little command station they had over there. And so we strolled along, you know. I mean,
Or I can see that right behind you in the picture too.
The photographs, yeah, the photographs.
And that painting was taken from a photograph. The bottom portion.
This one was.
Because I've seen that.
I see he's strolling along. Billy Bass, he fell way back at times. I mean, it was just like he was like he wasn't concerned with going along at all.
And who are these? Who is that officer? Do you know that officer?
This officer was Marvin Wise.
And then the next fellow that's Montoya?
That's Richard Montoya, Charles Harrison, and me, if that's who they truly were. We were strolling on in the first place. Harrelson was up in the front, but he was just lagging along, and he treated the whole thing like he was a big joke. I think he was smoked up on something. And finally, Montoya changed places with him and got ahead of him, and so forth. But they didn't seem to be too concerned. As you can see, I'm carrying my little bag with the radio in it, you know, and that sort of thing. So they took us around and turned us over to Elkins.
Have either one of those gentlemen ever said anything about this? Do you know?
Oh, well, they say that's not who they were. Of course, they located a guy that he said that he was him. His name was Doyle.
Him being Richard Montoya?
No.
No?
He said he was Doyle. He said
okay.
They were these two, this guy, both these two of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And they said they were bona fide tramps. But there's a lot, and they were arrested that day. They've never come up with any pictures of these guys in '63 to identify them.
What about Charles Harrelson? I mean, he's in jail right now.
He's in jail right now. He said it wasn't him. Mm. But he also said at another time that if he ever gets out, I'll give you some information you would really like to have. And they said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, I won't tell you what it is, but I'll tell you the date. It was November 22nd, 1963. So he said that he said at one time that he was involved, and at other times he said he wasn't involved.
Mm-hmm.
But and years later they found some records of three guys by the name of Doyle, Gedney, and Abrams,
mm-hmm.
and who they said that's what these three guys were. Well, at first the everybody was intrigued about the idea that we have these three guys, and they're picked up, and they don't keep any records of them. There's no pictures of them or anything else, and they released them, right on the spot. Well, now they came along, and after the movie, Oliver Stone's movie,
mm-hmm.
and they had a lot of controversy over it and a lot of publicity about the thing. The Dallas Police Department decided that they were going to open their files. And when they opened their files, the first went right in, almost in plain view, was 3 arrest records. And the person who found these 3 arrest records happened to be a husband and wife team by the name of Fontaine, and they found these arrest records. They paid Doyle $25,000 to appear on Inside Edition. Now, Doyle was living up in this little apartment way up in Oregon. He was working some kind of a menial job, like cleaning out a bar or something like that. So I imagine he was glad to get that $25,000. Well, when they had him on Inside Edition, I saw the Inside Edition, and he went over and he opened his little drawers in his little apartment. He said he's going to bring out something, and you were thinking he was going to bring out something sensational about this. And what he had in his hand was the edition of the Globe, about me, where I had claimed that I had said the globe was headed, Woody Harrelson's father killed John F.
Oh, I
Kennedy,
remember that.
and I gave him the gun.
Yeah.
So he didn't come out with anything sensational. But the point I'm making, we're getting way off the track.
Yeah, but we can get back on track.
Yeah. But the fact that now they're saying that they had records of these three guys, that they were arrested for burglary, and they were kept in jail 4 days, and they went before a judge, and we still have no mugshots, no fingerprints, no records of any kind to indicate that. That's even worse than the original thing where they were worried that they were reduced on the spot, because a lot of people were reduced on.
Yeah.
They dragged all kinds of people out there in that day, and they let a lot of them go. Some of them they took down, and some of them they interrogated a little longer than others.
Now, how did this picture? This is the press.
Yeah.
This is the press.
Yeah.
And there is someone I've heard you and Mom talk. I've heard you talk to somebody else, but someone identified you with a picture of you in your skull and has confirmed.
Well, they've done a couple of. There's a couple of forensic photographers, examined the photographs and so forth, and one was Lois Gibson, who's with the Houston Police Department, done a lot of work for the FBI and so forth, and then she said she'd stake her reputation on that fact that I was this gentleman. And they did another study of another individual. I can't think of his name, but it was done for Al Gonzalez, who was a member of the investigating team for the Senate investigating team. That he did a study that was for Al Gonzalez, and he claimed that I was this person, and he also did a study of the New Orleans photograph, and
the New Orleans photograph. In front of the
trademark.
Yeah.
That was also with me.
Okay, well, what people say that it is or it isn't, or and we're sitting here and it was you. So what happened after this point? They escorted you.
They took us over to. Turn us over to Elkins.
And you're walking through Dealey Plaza right now?
We went around Dealey Plaza.
Okay.
We went all the way around.
Is that this bridge and
yeah,
okay.
we went all the way around Dealey Plaza.
Okay.
By the book depository and over to Houston and Elm Street, which was, they had a little headquarters set up there. So they turned me over to Elkins. Elkins called Will Fritz, chief of homicide from the police department, Dallas Police Department. He came over and he told Elkins turn him over to the FBI, Gordon Shanklin. Gordon Shanklin was the agent in charge of the Dallas office. And they took us in there. We reiterated what we had said before and so forth, and we admitted that we were armed, and we showed him our guns, which they photographed, and then he, of course, what saved us was the fact that Oswald had been captured. He had been captured, and for all intents and purposes, the entire thing was a closed matter at that time. As a matter of fact, J. Edgar Hoover had already talked to Shanklin before he released us. He had already talked to Shanklin, indicating that, hey, they've got the killer, he's a lone communist nut, and once Hoover said something, it was chiseled in stone, and no one was going to, and of course...
but no statements, no pictures, no follow, I mean, nothing to...
Nothing. He just said, hey, he gave us our guns back, and of course, they were interested in my guns, not so much the other guns. They were, that I gave to Montoya and Harrelson, they were regular off-the-line production model guns, but I had a Shorty 45, which is it's a 45 that has been cut down in size. Everything is genuine about it. They've cut down the slide, they've cut down the grips, they've cut down everything. It just wouldn't, it would only shoot 5 shots instead of 7, but it was a full house 45, made out of custom-made parts and everything. Is probably cost $4,000 or $5,000, I think.
Oh, wow.
Then I had another. I had also.
Did they take it?
No, they gave it back to me.
Mm.
Then they took photographs of it, and later on, through a ex-FBI agent, I was able to get those photographs from an agent in New Orleans.
Oh, wow.
I mean, agent in Dallas, in the Dallas office, sent the thing. I didn't get the negatives, but I did get the print of it. The other gun was they call it the official designation of the gun was a Simmerling L2, but they usually referred to it as the Lichtman because the Lichtman was the designer of the gun. It was a 45 that was no bigger than that.
Really?
You could lay it in the palm of your hand.
And it was a 45?
It was a 45. You thought it was a little pea shooter.
Like 220, like a 22 or something?
Well, you look at that till you look at the hole in it. And of course, what happened is the Lichtman. I mean, it wasn't a semi-auto. I mean, when you fired it, you had to rack the next shell in yourself.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 like that. And of course, it was a real powerful gun. And I mean, you could hide it. I could hide it right in there. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so small. So they were very interested in that gun. And all the agents were in there looking at it and this and that and the other and asking how it shot, you know, because you think a gun that short a barrel is not very accurate, but up to 10 to 15 yards was very accurate. It was a very accurate gun. So at that time, then, you know, he said, go your own way. I mean, he just seemed to. Shanklin just seemed to be anxious to get rid of us, and that was it. So So
in some way, they must have confirmed. I mean, why let out a person who's either a hobo or maybe working for the government and the BATF, but the point being is I mean, did they confirm all this? Do you know that they had to have confirmed it?
No.
So they just let this man with a really unique gun
Oh yeah.
go.
Yeah. They didn't. They just turned us loose.
So where did you go?
I went out and immediately I called up.
I mean, where'd you run?
No, I didn't run, but I sure didn't go back and get that station wagon. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
That was in Dealey Plaza. I went out to call up. We had an agent in Dallas who maintained a safe house, and his name was Whitlock. And I went to call him up, and I didn't get him. I called up the Cabana Hotel to talk to Jim Braden, and who I knew was at the Cabana. I knew that he and Morgan Brown. Morgan Brown was a brother of Melvin Brown, who was a close associate of Phil Twombly. I knew they were there at the Cabana.
And they had checked out, hadn't they?
Yeah, well, actually, Morgan Brown had checked out. Braden hadn't checked out yet. And then I went to, so I called, and then later on, I did get a hold of Braden. I told him that, I asked him if he wanted to fly back to California with us, and he said no, they came out in a private plane, and they were going to Houston, and he had to be back in Dallas on some business, so he couldn't avail himself. I finally got a hold of Michael Whitlock. Michael Whitlock took me out to Red Bird Airport. I often wonder I didn't think of it, but why the hell didn't I just go out and get a taxi cab, you know?
Yeah.
Or a bus, or anything. But to tell you the truth, you're not really thinking too clearly in those situations. I wasn't. Of course, I was worried about the station wagon being there, and I did want to get in touch with Whitlock to give him instructions on what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, because we still had guns in the station wagon that was supposed to be delivered to John Mason. So I got a hold of Whitlock, and he gave me a ride to Redbird, and then I was able to, we were able to talk about things. I told him about the station wagon, and I said, man, when things cool down, go back, pick up the station wagon, take the guns over to John Mason, then and drive the station wagon down to Morgan City, Louisiana, and I'll reimburse you for it. He said, I said okay, and sometime in December, I don't know exactly when, I got a letter from George Reynolds stating that Whitlock had picked up the station wagon, delivered the guns, and that they were there and the station wagon was there at his place in Morgan City. I ended up selling the station wagon to his aide, Leroy Young, and so then of course we picked up the airplane and flew from there to the Grace Ranch. We filed an in-flight. We filed a flight plan in flight. We didn't file a flight plan when we took off. So we filed a flight plan en route, and so then we flew into Tucson, where my plane was, and so then and Candy flew on to Bermuda Dunes, and I stayed there and visited with Peter Licavoli for a few days before I came back.
Wow. Were you married to Mom
Yes.
at this time?
Yeah.
Oh. So you went home. Did you, what, after that, then you basically went home
Yeah.
and all right. Because I know Mom didn't know what you did, any of that point. So you just
No,
kind of came home and...
No, she had no idea. Now, in December, we were living in Sherman Oaks. So I was sitting there with Bud Belcher, Adrian Cole, who was another contract agent, and I were sitting there sipping some moonshine that my uncle had.
So this is good moonshine.
Good moonshine. We're sipping some of this.
What does good moonshine taste like? Because I've heard that, moonshine can taste like alcohol, but good moonshine.
No, it doesn't taste hard like anything.
Doesn't it go down
real? Oh, it goes down
easy?
really smooth, and then it starts to warm up in your stomach. It's like a hand grenade going off. And so we were sitting there and we were drinking this when...
in other words, you were sipping it a lot, though, right?
Yeah,
you're releasing a little bit of tension here, right?
We were hitting it pretty good. And so we were sitting there, and my father-in-law,
My grandpa.
your grandfather, called me and said that there was two very mysterious individuals who were over there looking for me. And they had a lot of information on me, although they didn't say who they were or anything. So, of course, naturally, the first thing I thought of was Dallas. And I didn't know whether it was the cops looking for me, or maybe it was somebody wanting to silence me. And unfortunately, as it turned out, your grandmother had actually told them where I lived.
Oh, my.
So they knew where I lived.
Oh,
and
wow.
I knew that I really wouldn't be hard to find anyway, for the simple reason that I was driving a brand new Cadillac convertible with Arizona plates. Well, Arizona plates are not going to be hard to find in
No.
California. And the car, that's how they found me in the first place, because that car is registered to be in Arizona, but the date, the address on it was your grandparents' address in Beverly Hills.
Oh, wow.
So I immediately thought, well, you know what, I got to get out of here. And they say, they said, and we were sitting at this bar stool sipping this stuff, and I stepped off of the I stepped off the stool and just sunk right down to my knees, and I was heading out the door. I was heading for the door on my knees.
Yeah,
You know?
I heard there's a lot of witnesses to that.
Yeah, I guess it's true. Boy, that stuff hit me. So anyway, we first had to figure out what we're going to do about this damn car.
So did you get out? I mean, who's going to drive?
I don't know. I think Bud Belcher drove. So we
The one that could walk?
yeah, whoever could walk. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the three Texans that came out of the bar, and the two of them that were carrying this other guy, and they got in their pickup truck, and one Texan says, "Hey," he says, "where are we going to put this guy?" He says, "Well, let's put him in the back." He says, No, we put him in the back, he'll fall out. And the other one said, "Well, we can put him up here in the front between it." No, there's not enough room. And the other guy said, "I got it, we let him drive." Anyway, no, Bud, I guess Bud drove. But anyway, we drove over. His father owned a big house over in the Hancock Park section of old section of Los Angeles, you know. So he had a big 6-car garage, and so we drove it over there, and we put that in his garage, and then we called up Frank Belcher, and we told him what would happen. So he said, go down to Long Beach and talk to Joe Ball. Now Joe Ball was one of the most powerful lawyers in the country, and he was actually a de facto partner of Frank Belcher. Now, they didn't want to be in the same law firm together, for the simple reason that when something would come up and you'd have multiple defendants, Frank Belcher would defend one of them, and Joe Ball would defend the other. That way, they got a double fee. They didn't have any problems with conflict.
Good strategy.
Oh, a great deal. As a matter of fact, that's what happened when Phil Watson was the assessor of San Diego County, property assessor. You know, it's a very powerful job. And so he was indicted for accepting a bribe from a man named Gold from the Newberry Company. So what happened is Joe Ball represented Phil Watson, and Frank Belcher represented Gold. You see, and the funny thing about that was that Nancy Belcher, she was just out of law school, UCLA Law School. So she came to court with her father every day. So romance blossomed in the courtroom, and she married Phil Watson after the wedding.
Oh, wow.
So Phil Watson then was...
They could just continue the family tradition.
Yeah. And of course, Bud told me, you know, many times, he told me many times about the bribes and the perks that Watson got because of having being assessor. Because if you knock down the assessor, how you assess a property, I mean, you save a lot of money in property tax. So he had a real, but they didn't convict him. He was found not guilty, and he walked away from it. But that's how they worked together, you know. So he said, okay, go down to see you go down to see Joe Ball. So I went down to see Joe Ball, and but Ball happened to be in Washington because they were just appointing the commission to investigate the assassination, which later became known as the Warren Commission. So he was appointed as a senior counsel for the Warren Commission. But I talked to the senior partner in the thing, which was Hunt. It was Hunt, Hart, Ball, and Hunt, Hart, Ball, and Hunt, Hart.
Some Jew, like a Jew, Burrow.
No, that was later on. Later on, it was Hunt, Hart, Ball, Bayerwitz, and Brown, which was Governor Brown. But
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So I went to see him, and I told Hunt, you know what happened? I said, hey, we were there, pictures were taken of us, we're worried about these pictures, and we're worried about it being identified. And I told him about these two guys that came there. I said, we have no idea who they are. We don't know whether they're hitmen from the CIA or a hitman from someplace else, organized crime, or they might be the police. We have no idea who this is. So he said, well, okay, don't worry about it. He said,
don't worry about it.
yeah, great. He said, Joe has just been, if it is from the police, he said, Joe's just been appointed as senior counsel of the Warren Commission, and their job is to, he said this very specifically, the purpose of the Warren Commission, or the new commission they're forming, is to prove to everyone that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone assassin. So
without all the conclusive evidence and
you
everything.
can believe me when I tell you that that is what it was formed for. So
in other words, you don't have a problem if it's the police.
Yeah. So,
but that doesn't take care of your problem if it's somebody else.
No, that doesn't take care of the CIA. You're not worried. You don't worry about the police as much as you are the CIA. So anyway, we go back to see Frank Belcher, and we tell Belcher, we tell Belcher what happened, and he said, "Okay, well then we'll see if we can take care of it, and if we find out anything ahead of time, we'll let you know." So I gave him my Belcher my power of attorney to sell the airplane, because the airplane was in my name. So he agreed to sell the airplane. I was asking $9,500 for it, and I was sold it for less, but I wanted $9,500 for it. I went to George Hensey. George Hensey was Frank Belcher's nephew. He was Bud Belcher's cousin. He was a member of Frank Belcher's law firm, and he was another high-powered lawyer. So I went to him. He bought the Cadillac from me. Practically stole it. But
well, $9,500 for an airplane, I'm still stunned on.
Well, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, but how much did you buy the Cadillac for? I'm just curious.
The Cadillac?
Yeah.
The Cadillac was about $8,000.
For a brand new Cadillac?
Convertible. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yeah.
With hardly any miles on it, too. Just brand new.
Oh, it wasn't driven at all. Right off the showroom floor.
Oh my.
They didn't buy it used. So.
Wow.
So anyway.
I'm sorry, I'm just stunned.
So Hensey bought it from me.
Mm-hmm.
And.
Well, of course he got it for a good deal. You had to get rid of it.
Oh, I had to get rid of it.
And he knew it, I'm sure.
He knew it. And I wanted cash. I didn't want any checks.
Yeah.
And so he made me promise I'd paint a portrait of he and his wife in addition. Of course, I never did.
Yeah.
I promised it, but I said, hey.
Yeah, I'm sure you were going to promise a lot of stuff right then and there.
I revised that.
That's right.
I revised that contract.
Yeah.
You bet your sweet life. So then Frank and I and Adrian Cole, he's another agent.
Mm.
He doesn't fit in very much. He was in and out.
Yeah.
But he we flew to Acapulco, and I was going to stay down in Acapulco for a while. But the more I got to thinking about it, and I got to thinking about it, I don't think I'm moving back to California for a while. So I started calling up everybody that I could think of, those guys from JM Wave that I'd known, Larry Downs and Tom Franklin and Ron Howard and
Not the director.
not the director. Joe Kingsley and so forth, and trying to find a spot for me. So finally, I called Paul Helliwell, and he was an old-time OSS guy, and he was he ran a whole bunch of companies for the CIA in the Miami area. And so he said, well, I got a spot for you if you want to. I'll give you a job with International Basic Economy Corporation. It was a huge conglomerate owned by the Rockefeller interests, and they had all this money invested in South America. And so he said, what they're doing down there now, we've got a project on. We're trying to upset the election or depose the president of Brazil, whose name was João Goulart. And Goulart, he'd gotten in, and he was an out-and-out communist. Or if he wasn't an out-and-out communist, he had some out-and-out communists beside him. So we.
It sounds like your thing.
Yeah,
it's just
right.
Mom.
So anyway, I went down to work for them, and they owned a bunch of CL-44s, which were a Canadair cargo plane. At that time, it was the biggest cargo plane in the world. And when I was out in Arizona at Marania, I'd had some training in this airplane. So I went down. I was down to fly down there, and also to what they were. As I told you, they were trying to upset this election. So we were down there entering candidates, trying to overturn the voting here and there, putting out all kinds of disinformation, spreading money around here, spreading money around there. And this all took place up in northern Brazil, northern Brazil is the poorest part of Brazil. And these poor countries are always ripe for any kind of revolution or that sort of thing. So we were up most of the time in Belo Horizonte, which was in the state of Minas Gerais, then Recife, which was in Pernambuco, and Belém, which was in the state of Paraná. So we were down there, and I worked not only for the IBEC, which is International Basic Economy Corporation, but also I worked for an organization called the IFLD. It was called International Federation of Free Labor Development, which seems like a nice name for something that's trying to upset the country. And another organization which I always liked the initials for it is IBAD.
IBAD?
IBAD, yeah.
And what did that stand for? International
Brasileiro Aid Development. So we were but on April 1st, 1964, they managed to foment a coup.
So were you staying down there this whole time?
Yeah, I was back and forth.
Oh, okay.
I got to come back and forth, but I was down there up until then. I was down there most of the time. Before that, I don't even think I came back to the States. But I came back.
Well, you probably had to call Mom and tell her to roast.
Yeah, well, I talked to her on the phone, but
didn't. I was gone for quite a while, and
Such a fast life.
then I came back and was back and forth in 64 and 65, back and forth all the time between Brazil, and then later on was in Chile. But I came back, and before we decided to go, I called up everybody, you know, to see if it would help. First of all, would the documentation mill, would it go along, and the other proprietary interests, or if they were going to be able to operate without me, and they all assured me that they would be able to take care of everything. The documentation mill that we had at that time, which was the Los Angeles Stamp and Stationery Company, because of the stuff that we put out during the Kennedy assassination, we decided to close that up, and we sold it off and moved the equipment up to a place which we call Scimitar Studios, which is up on Melrose in Los Angeles, and we operated there for a while, and then we moved to over to La Brea. But that's how these companies how we would operate. We'd open a business, operate at a site for a while, sell it off, move the equipment.
So you'd have to, yeah, you'd have to do that.
New name, new everything else. So that in 64 and in 64 and 65, that I got back.
And I was born in 64.
Yeah, you were born in 64.
Yeah.
So I was here, you know, I came back when you were born.
Yeah.
And I was here when you were born.
Did you come back from a particular place, or were you already here? Do you remember?
No, I was here a little while before you were born. Because we were living in Laguna Beach. So I was here, but still all this stuff was going on, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we were still flying all over.
Oh, of course.
Flying all over the world, and then I came back and.
Do you remember the poem that you wrote me
No.
a while ago regarding? It was when I was 14. I don't know if you remember. 14 years ago today at South Laguna by the bay.
Yeah.
That was a good poem.
So anyway.
You have a real good poem on that picture behind your head.
Yeah.
Where your chalk.
Yeah. Oh, the drawing.
Yeah, that you haven't mentioned in any of our filming,
yeah.
And I wanted you to kind of just say what that poem
that's
said.
the thing. I wrote that little saying on the on that particular that particular one. I said, "Though worlds apart from life's first breath, these equals now are joined in death," because it seemed to epitomize the fact that here we have Kennedy, who had the world by the tail, you know, all born with a silver spoon in his mouth, inherited $1 million when he's 21, never worked a day in his life, on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have Lee Harvey Oswald, who was jerked up by the hair of the head, as they say, and never had anything, and so forth. They weren't born equal, they weren't equal in life, but they were certainly equal in death.
How true.
Death is the great equalizer. So
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, I just think that's so neat, and I didn't want to miss that. So you're closing up, you're making sure that everything's...
we're moving around and everything. But in the meantime, we got back, and it seemed like in 65, it seemed like no one seemed to be looking for me at that time, and so I just settled down into going into handling all the stuff that I was handling for Licavoli.
When did it start slowing down from what you're hearing? Because it must be very odd. I mean, most people, you're going into, let's just say, a restaurant, and you hear, "Oh my gosh, isn't that a shame about the president? The president was assassinated. Where were you?" I mean, so many people have asked those same questions. Yeah. What was it like to just be sitting somewhere and to be hearing, you had to have heard the gossip of other people, what they were thinking, that awful Oswald, of course he did it. I mean, you had to be reserving opinions inside wherever you go, because
Well,
this was a...
had to bite your tongue, you know, to keep from saying, hey, that guy didn't shoot the president.
Yeah.
But,
So when did things start to die down?
well, in 65, it didn't seem that no one had been around looking for me and
Yeah.
so forth. So,
And Ruby had already done...
yeah, he got rid of Oswald. And so I think...
One thing...
And then, of course, the Warren Commission came out in 64, into 64, and they placed the blame entirely on Oswald.
Yeah.
And everybody was just trying to, and those ones who were pro-Warren Commission were just wanting to sweep it under the rug. Of course, it never happened. I mean, it just kept right on building up and building up and building up.
Is it, I might have just heard this, but is it true or not true that Ruby, though, didn't he beg to be taken somewhere?
Oh yeah,
to tell...
When Warren him personally came down to talk to him in the Dallas jail, he begged Warren to take him back to Washington. They said he would tell him the truth of everything. And of course, for some reason, Warren just refused to do it, you know, and so forth, and he ended up dying there in jail. Later on, of course, the apologists for the Warren Commission, they say, that was just the ravings of a madman. He was off his rocker at that time, so we don't believe it. But the apologists, they have a way of apologizing for everything. Something comes up, they have an easy, facile explanation to how they can not face up to the facts.
And why did he say that he killed Oswald?
Oh, he killed Oswald. According to him,
I think this is too funny.
well, the purpose of the official version of it was that he said that he didn't want to, that he killed Oswald so that Jackie Kennedy wouldn't have to come back from town to testify. In the first place, chances are she wouldn't have had to testify. Second place, here's a guy that was a whoremonger, ran a strip joint, beat up women. He didn't even watch the motorcade, and yet suddenly he's going to give his life so that this woman, that actually what his first that was concocted by his first lawyer, concocted that idea of that's what he was going to say, and he stuck with that story. But that certainly wasn't the truth of the matter. But,
well, I just thought that's a funny thing to touch on.
Yeah,
so 65, it's dying down.
65, it's dying down. And of course we're.
You're still doing the stuff down there, for IBAD. No, that's all.
No, I was back by that time because they'd already pulled off that coup, and which only 45 people were killed in the coup, but they had thousands and thousands were afterwards that were persecuted and killed, you know, in the wake of the coup, when the military took command. But we came so in 65 we were going on, and of course we had a lot of interesting projects that were involved in that period from, say, 65 on, that in the 60s that involved Licavoli, which are really really interesting events and interesting things to give you some insight into to Licavoli's character and also the character of the CIA agent and so forth. And I won't try to put them in the proper chronological order. In other words, this happened in this time in 65 and that. It's just they all happened in that time.
Now let's just hear some stories.
One, I did a lot of collecting for Licavoli. And one interesting collecting money that was due him, mainly gambling debts. And gambling debts, even even in Nevada, are not collectible. They, if they're dumb enough to give you credit, then you lose.
Even in Nevada, then?
And even in Nevada.
Hmm.
Although they had a interesting, just recently they had an interesting case in that regard, but they are not collectible. So we had this guy that his name was Sid Goldstein. Called himself Big Sid, and had it on his license plate, Big Sid. Big Sid was a guy who liked to gamble but didn't like to pay off. And he ended up being indebted to Licavoli for about $30,000, and he wasn't about to pay it. So Licavoli says, "You go up to Las Vegas and have a talk with this guy." So another guy and I from Detroit, we went up and we checked into the Fremont Hotel where we'd heard that he was staying. And of course the Fremont was owned by the hidden interest was the Detroit crowd. You know, they owned Fremont. And the bell captain, whose name was Ross Manishi, was he was also a you know, he knew all those guys. He was a friend. So we went up to talk to Big Sid. We went up to his room. All right at once he told us, you know, where we could go. I'm not paying you guys. And I'm not afraid of those spaghetti vendors either. You tell them, I mean, I know people too, you know. I said, okay. So we left. So we went out and we went over to, went up to a big snake farm that they had up in North Las Vegas. We bought a snake, big rattlesnake, had about 13 rattles on him, had a head about that broad. I mean, he was one big snake. We bought this snake and we put it in the refrigerator, and of course it's in that suspended animation state. And you can lay it on your arm, put it on the back of your neck, which gives you the shivers, or anything. Put it in your pocket.
So it's hibernating.
It's hibernating. Yeah. So we put it in the refrigerator. Okay. So we sat around playing cards and everything. Ross Manishi says, called up and says, "Hey, guess who asked for his bags?" And he said, "Who?" "Big Sid." He said, "Okay. Big G owes you," because they used to call that was the they used to call Licavoli Big G because of his ranch, you know, the Grace.
Oh, the Grace Ranch.
Yeah, they called him the Big G. The Big G owes you something. So we hustle down into the valet parking, and we stick this snake under the seat of the car. And so you can just imagine what's happening. He's on his way back to Los Angeles. He's tooling along down about Baker when this snake comes to life, starts striking at him. He rolled the car over 3 or 4 times, ended up out in the desert. And then, of course, when they got out there, the highway patrol came out and they lifeline picked him up, took him back to the Sunrise Hotel, Sunrise Hospital there in Las Vegas, and so he told the troopers, you know, he kept babbling about this huge snake that was in his car. And of course the snake had slithered off into the desert. And these guys said to him, "I don't know what, buddy, I don't know what you've been smoking, but if I were you, I'd give it up." And, so anyway, we went down and we took him flowers and went in to see him. "He says, I want to kill you guys when I get out of here," and everything, but he paid before he was discharged in the hospital. So that was one little operation involving Licavoli. Was rather interesting. And then another one through the Southwest Aircraft Corporation. We owned an off-brand helicopter called the Brantley. It was in competition with Bell and those, but never got off the ground. It's long since they've long since been out of business. Anyway, I was flying around this thing trying to get trying to get that rating put on my license, which incidentally was in somebody else's name. Wasn't even my name. But anyway, I was taking some lessons in this, and we were trying to sell this thing, and it was insured for $26,500, and we were trying to sell it for $19,500, and if somebody came along giving us a valid offer for 15, we'd have probably taken 15. So Peter Licaboli called me up one day, and he said, "Hey, when you're out there flying around out in Simi Valley or someplace practicing with that helicopter, why don't you fly that damn thing into one of those mountains out there and we'll collect?" I said, "Hell, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get killed." I mean, he said. So anyway, finally, I really vetoed that. So we got. He said, "Oh, you better walk away from crashes before." I mean, yeah. I said, I'm not going to deliberately crash that damn thing. So anyway, I went down to take the license take the test for the license. And I got this examiner. He was a real jerk. I mean, he's the kind of guy that would steal the fuses out of the panel and then yell, "Oh my God, we're out of gas." Things like that. This guy was a jerk. So we got out, we got over to Van Nuys, and he said, "Now I tell you what I want you to do. I want you to lay out a course for me between Van Nuys up to Bakersfield, then up through the Tehachapi Pass to Tehachapi, and then back into Van Nuys." He said, "That will give me, I'll be able to observe you all types of terrain." I said, "Okay."
There's a lot of canyons, mountains there. That's got to be bad wind.
Canyons, mountains, terrible. Terrible place for a chopper. So anyway, we flew up to Bakersfield without any problem. We gassed up in Bakersfield and we flew over through the Tehachapi Pass up to Tehachapi. Now in those days, Tehachapi was nothing. I mean, it was just an isolated airfield. I mean, with nothing there. Oh, incidentally, that was the airfield that later on Joe Canty, the guy who flew into Dallas with us, with me, and flew the airplane back. He was killed at that airplane in a very mysterious crash. They don't really know what happened, why he was there, what he was doing, or anything. He supposedly, now here's a guy who had about 40,000 hours in this particular airplane. He supposedly made a bad landing and it flipped over and broke his neck. A bad landing. Yeah, flipped over and broke his neck. So that doesn't make you sleep at night.
Oh, yeah, no.
That stuff, you know.
Mechanical or something, definitely, but not somebody's got that many hours. But
anyway, so we get up to Tehachapi, and he tells me, and it was in August, he said, "Now, I want you I want you to hover. Don't want you to land, I just want you to hover." I said, "Well, this field is almost 5,000 feet high, and the air is awfully thin out there, and it is hot. It's probably," so I said, I don't really feel confident that I can control this craft under these conditions. He said, "Don't worry about it." He said, we'll be able to get forward speed on if anything goes wrong, and before anything would happen. So we were about 15 feet above the runway, and that chopper dropped like a rock.
Oh!
Hit the tarmac, broke the skids. It was one of those skid operators. Broke the skids, flipped over on the bubble.
Oh.
The rotor is churning into the tarmac. There's fire coming from the...
Oh my God!
I mean, the sparks are coming from that, We were scrambling trying to get out, and gasoline all over the place. So we finally got out, and we tried. So we saw it. It didn't explode or anything. So we approached it very gingerly, and we tried to operate the radio, but we weren't doing any good. So we finally we'd seen a crop duster working down down the ways, and so we hiked down to where that crop duster was, and he flew us from there into Bakersfield in a Stearman, and a Stearman is a two-place open cockpit airplane, two-place, and I had to sit in this inspector's. I had to sit in his lap. We flew down there, and this guy's fuming, and we get down there. And of course, I had to go in and file. I went in and filed a report.
Well, he was foolish.
Yeah, yeah. Here I am. I'm in there filing an accident report on a guy's license, not even mine. But anyway, so I feel like.
But you still wanted that report filed.
Yeah. But anyway, well, they took you right over there to file it. I mean, they said, hey, you've got to file this report. So, they're investigating the thing. So, wasn't anything I could do. So, I filed a report. But it's funny, it was the next day, Licavoli called me up, and he was jubilant. He says, God damn. He said, not only did you wreck that thing, you had an FAA examiner on board. They'll never be able to deny our claim then, because they didn't,
Oh, right.
But a few months later, I went back to take a test again, and I went back, and the guy said, "Oh, I remember you. You're the student pilot that crashed with old Swenson on board, didn't you?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, he said, I want you to know old Swenson got transferred to Yuma because of this." And he said, "This is going to be an interesting flight." And he failed me. I never did get a certificate, but I flew the damn thing anyway. It didn't make any difference. Those guys that flew, the CIA contract agents, they flew all the time without having a license. Shower Shoes Wilson, who was a legend over in the Far East, he'd probably built up 45,000 hours, and they suddenly discovered he didn't have a pilot's license, any kind of pilot's license. They sent him back to the States to get a pilot's license.
Oh, funny.
That happened all the time.
45,000 hours.
Oh yeah, he put in a lot. He was a legend over there. He flew called him Shower Shoes Wilson because he flew in shower shoes. That's all he'd wear to fly in. And he walked out of Vietnam twice with his shower shoes on.
Really?
Yeah, he was some kind of guy. But that was another one of the interesting projects.
So how do you send a message to somebody like the rattlesnake and the?
Well,
is it pretty? Just you got to be creative, or?
Oh yeah. You've got to be creative and let them know that hey, something could happen to you. So he could see ahead of time that down the road that you're probably going to be active until he did give in. But
I think it's really fun. Remember, this is years later on, but remember when we had the ranch?
Yeah.
Okay, and then we had the neighbors. We had the 40-acre ranch, which coyotes, everything around. But remember, the neighbors had a lame horse.
Yeah.
And they had, killed the horse or something, shot the horse. I don't remember what it was, but left it out for the coyotes.
Yeah.
To get them. And our dogs, which we had Great Danes, our dogs had dragged certain parts, I don't know, of the body. I think even the head they were gnawing on, because I guess that the coyotes didn't want the head or something. And did you think you were getting a little bit of a message?
Yeah, look at I saw a horse's head there. So what the hell? So, but another thing we did was we had these gallery. You had a gallery out on Lake Avoli. Had a gallery out in Tucson, out at the ranch, and he decided he was going to open a new gallery down on Speedway in Tucson, and he called it the Michelangelo Gallery. Well, not very original, but he loved those Italian names. So anyway, I called up the insurance company. See, out at the ranch, you had a specially built building that was just to house those paintings. I mean, it was connected in with the sheriff's department and everything else. And it was climate controlled and everything, this building, you know. So I called up the insurance company and said, we're going to take these paintings down. We're forming a new partnership, and we're going to take these paintings down and open this gallery on Speedway. And I want to know if these are covered. And he said, oh yeah, yeah. So we loaded up a whole bunch of paintings in a truck, and the guy who was driving the truck, he was involved in an accident on the way down there, and the damn truck caught fire and destroyed practically all of the painting.
Oh.
So we filed a claim. Suddenly we get back, and they say, "Oh no, you know your policy read that they had to be in a facility that was wired into the sheriff's department all the time." And
you know, and you,
said there's nothing in there that said about transporting that thing. That the underwriter said that the agent is just wrong. So Pete Licavoli was really mad. He said,
oh, I'm sure he was.
Those guys ought to be put in jail. He says, I want to cancel all my policies with him. I said, no, don't do that. We'll rip them off. We'll figure out a way to get no money back. We'll rip them off. Okay. So we opened this gallery, and we got them insured, and we met all the restrictions that they put on there, conditions as to how it would be. We had a burglar alarm that went right into Morris, and so forth, and we put them in, and we paid the premium for about 8 or 9 months, and so forth. But we discovered a chink in the little flaw in their system. A very small person could get through this duct for the air conditioning duct. So, working over a weekend, over a Labor Day weekend, we had a guy go in there, really small, slightly built individual. He got in there, took those paintings, removed them from the can, removed them from the stretcher bars, tubed all of them, pushed the tubes out through into a truck which was parked right there, pushed the tubes out there, and so forth, and then he left the same way that he came. Well, when Licavoli's daughter came in on Tuesday morning and opened the shop, my God! So
there's a whole bunch of frames.
That's right, frame. So we filed a report and so forth, and kept negotiating with the insurance company, and they kept procrastinating and so forth. And one day we get a letter from the insurance company. They filed for bankruptcy, and they're listing us as one of their creditors.
Mm.
So now what happened is Licavoli, he's screaming, those damn crooks, they ought to be in jail, you know. He didn't see the humor of it. You know, here we were trying to rip off the insurance company. Instead of that, now we're stuck with a bunch of hot paintings. So what happened is we rented this, had a guy using false ID, rented a storage locker, and put the paintings in there. And in with the paintings, he put a lot of stuff that had been boosted, stolen, you know. I mean, things where people had engraved their Social Security number and address and everything else on these things, so you know they were stolen, you know. So anyway, then he doesn't pay the rent. Well, they go in and they open it up and they look, and one day what happened is police call us up and say, hey, guess what, we found your paintings. So we got the paintings back. But that was
yeah, at least they weren't hot anymore.
Yeah, but that was a long drawn out exercise in money for absolutely nothing.
And what about the guy that did it? Did you pay him?
Who?
The little wiry guy.
Oh yeah, we had to fire him, pay him.
So you were still out.
Yeah, he wasn't. We just paid him to do it.
So he paid on insurance policies that he was real pissed off about it wouldn't cancel them in the first place.
Yeah.
Paid a little wiry guy.
Paid the wiry guy. Yeah. pay for the storage unit, and so forth. But you know what, though, one of the rarest things that ever happened with Licavoli was it. There was a guy by the name of John Ferrero, not to be confused with the John Ferrero who's been a fixture on the Los Angeles County City Council for about 50 years. But anyway, he was an old-time bookmaker, and he fell on bad times, and he was supposedly terminally ill, and so he had a big insurance policy, and so he came to Licavoli, and he wanted Licavoli to name him to loan him some money, and he would make him the beneficiary of his policy when he died. So Licavoli agreed and so forth, and they switched the policy over and so forth. But suddenly Ferraro makes a miraculous recovery. He's up in Las Vegas cavorting around with these showgirls that's young enough to be his granddaughter. Well, Licavoli didn't think too much of that. He was quite put out, and he came to me. Licavoli came to me and said, "Do you know anything about cyanide gas guns?" And I said, "Yeah, I know a little bit about them," and so forth. And he says, "Is it true that when they're somebody was killed with one of those that they almost always diagnose it as being from heart failure?" And I said, "Yeah, that's usually the case unless they dig into it a lot deeper, and they will." He said, "Now, what I want you to do, I want you to build a gas gun." And he said, "I'm going to give you $10,000, and I want you to knock off John Ferrero." I said, "Hey, wait a minute. You know, these gas guns are very, very unreliable. First of all, you've got to be damn sure that you don't get a whiff of that stuff, number one, because what happens is when that acid hits the cyanide, you can make any kind of version of a gas gun, but they're all based upon the same principle. Something in there keeps the acid and the cyanide separate. But when you have any kind of plunger and puts them together and it puts that whiff, it gets that gas. And first of all, you've got to be damn sure that you don't even get a whiff of that stuff yourself. And
so that eliminates the testing.
Or you've got to have an anecdote that you can take beforehand if you have an anecdote available. But they're very unreliable. So, but he just insisted. He pushed $2,500 in my pocket. Said, "Here's a down payment. You'll get the rest of it when the job's done." So here I am trying to figure out how am I gonna. I don't want to push Licavoli and say I'm just not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, you know,
you weren't going to do it.
I wasn't going to do it. I was trying to figure out how I was going to do it. I could have gone out and just shot the guy or something else without a gas gun, and it paid off just the same. But anyway, one weekend I'm over in Chandler, Arizona, and this guy lived in Phoenix, and lo and behold, this guy dies of a heart attack. John Ferrero. He dies from a regular heart attack.
Oh, real live heart.
Real heart attack.
Yeah.
Not induced by anything else. So the next time I see Licavoli, he says to me, "Boy, you did a great job." He said, "You'll get the balance of that $7,500 in a week or so." I said, "Hey, I didn't have anything to do with it." He's, "No. Don't tell me that." I said, "No, I didn't really." I said, "I was mulling it over and everything, trying to do it, but I didn't really do it and everything." And I said, "Take your $2,500 back." And he said, no. He just said, "That's okay." He says, "You're a good boy." He said, he let me. That was the ultimate compliment as far as Licavoli was. You are a good boy. So anyway, then of course we had a huge stock thing that went on in the latter part of 1960.
Stocks and bonds.
Stocks and bonds. Yeah, we had a huge one that went on in that period of time where we.
How does that work? How does that?
What happened? They had these two guys from New York that had worked for the Franklin National Bank in New York. One guy, his name was Melchiori, and another guy was named Flauraud. Flauraud, spelled F-L-A-U-R-A-U-D. Flauraud. Flauraud. And these guys, what had happened is that Melchiori, he was a homosexual, and he had had a homosexual affair with a guy named Angelo Torres. Angelo Torres was well connected, organized crime figure, and he was related to Jose Torres, who was the manager of the Flamingo. I mean, the Flamingo. He was the manager. He was the manager of the Flamingo, and so he used this homosexual contact to blackmail Melchior Torres. Uses this homosexual relationship to blackmail Melchiori into stealing a lot of stock, which they did. So to escape from that situation, he came to California, and Flauraud had already come to California and was working. He was the manager of the corporate transfer department of the Bank of America in downtown Los Angeles, and he got Melchiori a job there as that. Well, they both like to go to the racetrack, and I went to the racetrack every day, and one day.
Yeah, we had fun at the racetrack when I was a little older. But
yeah, wasn't that great time? But yeah,
oh, I had such a fun time.
Oh yeah, well,
that was so great.
Yeah,
beautiful. You know, what was that thing called that we went? We got the little stamps with the
turf club.
The turf club, and
yeah.
That was great. Yeah. You got to eat, and
they had the best.
And Mom always won.
Yeah, she had her race. I can never understand why she went to the race. Why she went to the window every time. Because she's betting every horse. So.
Well, I guess it was a thrill. She just wanted to win.
She just wanted to go that winner's circle. That go up and collect. But I was out there with some guys one day, and we knew all those officers from the Bank of America very well. And one day we were sitting in the box, and the guy who was the operations director operations officer for the Bank of America at the San Vicente wheelchair branch happened to come by. So he was with a couple other guys, and he said, "Hey, we have got room here. Why don't you sit in the box?" I said, "Okay." So he introduced me to these two guys, which was Melchiori and Flauraud. And so we'd see these guys at the racetrack almost every day, and they'd come up and sit in the box and this and the other. And we finally got around the fact that it turned out that Melchiori, he had owned a couple of horses together with a guy down here that we did some bits with in San Diego who owned an art gallery here. So, but anyway, we got to the point where after a while, I was going with Marty Finster. We were going out with Marty Finster, who was had been very close to Lick Boulder all these years. So I was going out to the track with Marty Finster every day. So what was happening is that we were.
Is there a reason for you going to the? I mean, do you go to launder money or to bet on a particular horse, or
No, we went
just because you enjoyed it, or
no,
what?
we just went to go to the racetrack.
Okay.
And sometimes you'd have some information on a horse and everything.
Because
but-
sometimes you bet an awful lot of money
Well, yeah, we
on
did.
horses.
Yeah. I had a friend that
I mean, big bucks.
Oh yeah, he won $60,000. He won $60,000 on Monday, and he was borrowing money from me on Saturday.
Wow.
Oh, but you know, we bet lots and lots of money. I mean, sometimes in that particular box we bet $80,000-$90,000. You know, between everybody. But when you're at those big tracks where the mutual handle is very heavy, like at Santa Anita or Hollywood Park, these big bets don't influence the odds like they would at smaller tracks. Smaller tracks, you get those kind of bets, and they drive the price of the horse down to nothing, you know. But we bet an awful lot of money on the horses, and well, we were there, and I bet $50,000 once on a horse. Best betting situation I've ever seen in my life. Actually, we were just betting if the horse didn't break down. That's all we were betting on. It was in the Preakness that where Native Dancer won the Preakness. Native Dancer had just gotten beat as an odds-on favorite in the Derby. The Derby, being at Churchill Downs, is not nearly as nice a racetrack, or wasn't in those days. Was not. I mean, the track itself wasn't as nice a track as some of the other tracks. It was. I mean, the running surface of the track wasn't that good. So the difference between Churchill Downs and Pimlico, there was a big difference. But in the Pimlico, in the Preakness, the distance is 1/16 of a mile shorter. It's only a mile and 5/16, a mile and 3/16, and they only had 7 horses in the race. That meant that Native Dancer only had to beat 4 horses to be in the money, and he at that time they could only go down. The minimum they could go down in the state of Maryland was 210, was down to 220, 10%. So you would get 10% of your money. So you were just betting that horse didn't. As a matter of fact, I was about the 6th or 7th guy in line at the window. I didn't even watch the race. I mean, we just went and walked over to the $100 window and stood there waiting for them to pay us off. And I could hear the roar of the crowd. Everybody ran back and they said, "How much did he win by?" And that was all they were asking. He didn't win like he went off 1-5, but he didn't win like.
So you did win that bet.
Yeah, he won. He won by neck. He's that kind of horse. He didn't win by much, but anyways, so I put up $50,000, got back $55,000, which is not bad for less than 2-minute work.
For just standing there.
Yeah.
In a line.
Just stood there. And everything. So, well,
you never get that at the DMV.
No.
And you stand there a lot longer.
Well, anyway, we were in there all these times, and we were betting. These guys were pretty good plungers, you know. They were betting, and after a while, they were borrowing money from us, and then we.
So they were addicted. They were
Yeah,
addicted to
they
gambling.
were compulsive gamblers. So then we started. We started booking their bets for them. You know, and of course, so it turned out they owed us quite a bit of money. So when the situation came up to, you know, how you guys going to pay this off, then they suggested that they had a scheme whereby they could divert absolutely millions of dollars worth of stock. And since they were in the corporate, corporate transfer department.
And that's you got a lot of stories related to this coming up. Related to stocks and...
Yeah, not too much.
No, not too much?
No, we never had we didn't...
Oh, big thing?
No, this is about the, well, later on we do the one I got, but that was a different type of deal entirely than this. That's just the only two big events.
Well, I'm just saying, so we could take a break right now.
Yeah, okay.
Let's pause this, and we know where we left off.
Yeah.
At stocks.
Yeah.
And I like stocks. So let's just take a pause.
Well, you know, most people don't realize that in these corporate transfer stock departments of banks and other large financial institutions, they have literally thousands and thousands and thousands of shares of stock that are just about are more or less inactive. They haven't had any activity. The truth of the matter is, these people don't even know they've got this stock.
Well, yeah, well, most people, when you buy stock, you just kind of, you're holding it for a rainy day, right?
I mean, not so much that.
I don't know
I
any
think they inherit it, or it passes down, or they'll have a change in ownership, and the stock split, and these various ways. But however they do, or people die off and they don't find out about it. I mean, which is it's just people are careless with these little pieces of paper which are so valuable. So this, what they planned to do was predicated on that, what they would do. They go through, they would discover some shares of stock that was very, very inactive over the years. So what they would do, they would take and they would type up a certificate in somebody else's name and substitute it in the place of that one. And then that, of course, is available for sale. Now what they did, of course, was put it in the name of of a Confederate. Now they did it all in one name. His name was, they used the name of Richard Beck. Then what we did at the documentation mill, we made up documentation in various names. We had three different, well, they were sort of low-level mafiosa type that Licavoli knew, that he said he's using these guys because he said these guys they'll never talk as to you know, they wouldn't roll over in case they find out about them. The other individuals, Melchiori and Lerod, they were so terrified that they're not going to say anything. So the idea was just simply to substitute these shares of stock and take those shares of stock out. The reason substituting is so that the total number of shares of stock outstanding always agreed.
Yeah, stay in balance.
So it wasn't out of balance. And so we started doing that, and we had them. They stole a lot of shares of stock. They never actually found out how many shares of stock that they actually. But we, like I say, we had these three mafia types that they went to New York, they went as far away as Canada. A lot of it was processed in California, especially at Crow Whedon, where we had a inside man, Clayton Ankeny, to do the work for us. So that's what they were doing. And it was split up between us, between the two other guys, Melchiori and Farad, and everybody else got a share of the proceeds. Then we decided things went along pretty well, but we really weren't. We were afraid that something might happen. And what we decided to do, we decided to see if we could buy a stock transfer company, which would be doing the same thing as the bank did, but it's a private thing. We found one down the street at from where we had offices, and so we were able to, and we bought this transfer company, and we were doing quite well with it when the SEC started and this didn't happen until, so we went on for the latter part of '69 up until about '72. So the SEC started an investigation of Tanger Industries. It's a company that Florod and Melchiori had some connection with, and before had nothing to do with our operation, but Melchiori got antsy, and he went down and confessed to everything. Except he didn't confess to us. I mean, he didn't confess about us.
So he's saying what's happened, but not who's involved.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
they got the mafia guys,
Mhm.
because you have to remember that my signature and Licaboli's signature and nothing. We have nothing on paper. They
Yeah.
have these guys doing it. You see.
Yeah.
So they.
I'm
got,
trying to get a feel. This is like 69, 70, 71.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm like 5.
Yeah.
I'm 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So this, so when they did that, well, I mean, that was the end of that transaction. That little
You had to
scheme.
move on to.
That little scheme. Of course, they convicted Melchior, they convicted Florod, they convicted.
Nobody ever talked.
Nobody ever talked. They admitted that there was organized crime figures involved, but they said they were so too terrorized to identify them,
Well,
and they were. So they didn't.
how old were those guys? Were they older?
No, they were in their mid-30s.
Yeah.
Yeah. And funny thing about it, though, we still made a good deal for them. They got them brought up in front of Joe Ball and Frank Belcher's favorite judge, Harry Pregerson.
Oh, I thought that Joe Ball, and you were going to say Joe Ball and Frank Belcher helped him.
No. Well, they got him in front of Frank Belcher and Joe Ball's judge.
Yeah.
Their friendly judge, Harry Pregerson, and of course he gave him a little slap on the wrist, you know.
Yeah.
And they served a few months at the ranch over in Arizona, you know,
Yeah.
and then got out. They never did recover the money. So anyway, that was not a bad that wasn't a bad scheme.
I have a question for you. Have you ever has anybody tried to, kill you? I mean, all the involvement that you've been in. Actually, I know I've seen your wounds, so I already know kind of a lot of the things.
Sure.
Do you ever wonder if, everything that you're involved in, people just have kind of let it go, or they're dead, right?
Yeah, they were dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but
Because when we were living in Beverly Hills, you were nervous that you were pretty jumpy, secretive. You know, you always wore sunglasses. So you had to have thought that maybe if there wasn't anybody that was going to try and do anything. I mean, you're always looking over your back, your shoulder.
You're always afraid of being identified.
Yeah.
After all, you got all these different.
Is that why you'd wear
all these
sunglasses?
different identities, you know.
Yeah.
And I know I remember starting to go into a restaurant one time, and I saw a guy in this restaurant that I sure as hell didn't want him to see me, so I was able to take off, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was out of I forget that place, some steakhouse, Monty Steakhouse out in Westwood.
Well, we used to walk down to Lowry's. Remember we walked down acting like Mutt and Jeff?
Yeah.
And you'd act like a bear, and
Yeah,
you'd act,
yeah.
that was pretty
Yeah.
fun.
But anyway,
The tape's gonna end,
okay.
so we're gonna continue with another tape.